Welcome, fellow seeker of ancient wisdom, to the complete chronicle of Bending's sacred origins, the timeless dance between humanity and the elemental forces that shape our world. Tonight, we journey beyond recorded history to discover how the moon first whispered secrets to water, how badger moles carved the very foundations of earthbending, how dragons breathed life into flame, and how sky bison taught mortals to dance with wind itself. This is the story of original masters, whose teachings echo through every movement, every breath, every moment when human consciousness touches the eternal elements. So settle into comfort, let your spirit drift, and prepare to witness the birth of Bending itself. In the time before memory, when the boundary between spirit and mortal worlds was as thin as morning mist over still water, two ancient beings made a choice that would forever alter the relationship between humanity and the flowing essence of life itself. Tui and La, the moon and ocean spirits, crossed from their realm of pure energy into the physical world, carrying with them the first whispers of what would become waterbending. Not as conquest of element over consciousness, but as partnership between spiritual force and mortal vessel, a dance of give and take that would mirror the eternal push and pull of tide against shore. Their crossing was not marked by fanfare or cosmic upheaval, but by the quiet certainty that accompanies all truly significant transformations, the way dawn arrives without announcement, inevitable and perfect in its timing. They manifested themselves in forms that seemed almost mundane to those who might have witnessed their arrival. Two koi fish, one white as moonlight on snow, the other black as the depths of ocean trenches where no light had ever penetrated. Yet in their seemingly simple forms lay the concentrated essence of forces that moved oceans and pulled tides across the face of the world. The oasis where they chose to make their eternal home was already sacred to the people who would become the Northern Water Tribe, a place where spiritual energy pooled like water in a stone basin, where the veil between worlds grew gossamer thin during certain phases of the moon and particular configurations of stars. The spirit's arrival transformed this natural sanctuary into something approaching the divine, their presence creating currents of power that would influence every aspect of waterbending development for thousands of years to come. The dance they began in that sacred pool has never ceased, their circular movements tracing patterns that encode the fundamental principles of waterbending philosophy. The understanding that true power comes not from forcing water to obey, but from joining its natural flow, redirecting rather than resisting, finding strength through adaptation rather than rigidity. Each revolution they completed added another layer to the spiritual foundation that would support human waterbending mastery, their paired movements demonstrating the balance between opposing forces that would become central to all advanced techniques. The shamans and spiritual leaders who first witnessed this eternal dance recognized immediately that they were observing something beyond ordinary natural phenomena, though the full implications of what they were seeing would only become clear across generations of careful study and gradual understanding. The fish moved with purpose that transcended mere instinct, their patterns too precise and meaningful to be dismissed as simple animal behavior, their very presence creating changes in the spiritual atmosphere that sensitives could feel like pressure changes before a storm. The first human waterbenders emerged not through dramatic revelation or supernatural intervention, but through patient observation and gradually deepening connection to the spiritual forces that Tui and La embodied in their physical forms. These early practitioners learned to feel the subtle pull of lunar energy on their body's water content, to sense the way ocean tides responded to celestial movements, to understand that their element was never truly separate from the cosmic forces that governed its behavior throughout the world. The techniques that developed around this understanding were fundamentally different from the aggressive, dominating approaches that later corruption would introduce to waterbending practice. Original waterbending was meditation in motion, spiritual exercise that happened to manipulate physical elements rather than martial art, that incorporated spiritual principles as afterthoughts. Practitioners learned to empty themselves of ego and intention, becoming channels through which water could express its natural tendencies toward flow, adaptation, and life-sustaining circulation. The Northern Water Tribe's architecture and social organization grew around the sacred oasis where the spirits dwelled. Every aspect of their civilization designed to honor and protect the source of their elemental abilities while maintaining the spiritual purity that made advanced waterbending possible. The city's concentric circles mirrored the spirits' eternal dance, while the tribe's emphasis on healing and preservation reflected their understanding that water's highest purpose was sustaining and nurturing life rather than destroying enemies. Centuries passed like tidal cycles, each generation of waterbenders adding their own insights to the accumulated wisdom while never losing sight of the fundamental principles that Tui and La embodied through their endless circular dance. Masters learned to read the spirit's movements like a text written in motion, discovering new applications for established techniques, while developing innovations that remained true to the original philosophy of harmony between human consciousness and elemental power. The healing arts that became waterbending's greatest glory emerged from direct study of how the spirit's presence affected the oasis water, how their energy could restore balance to disrupted systems, how their spiritual purity could cleanse corruption from both physical and metaphysical sources. The first healing masters learned to channel not just water, but the life force that flowed through it when properly aligned with spiritual principles, their techniques accessing the same energies that allowed the spirits to maintain perfect health across millennia of physical existence. But it was in the birth of Princess Yue that the true depth of connection between spirits and mortals would be revealed, demonstrating how completely the boundary between human and elemental consciousness could be dissolved when circumstances required ultimate sacrifice for ultimate preservation. The child born to Chief Arnook and his wife arrived in the world already marked by spiritual significance, her unusual weakness and ethereal appearance suggesting that her soul existed partially in both mortal and spirit realms from the moment of her first breath. The desperate parents who carried their dying infant to the sacred oasis were responding to intuition that went deeper than mere hope, their hearts somehow understanding that the spirits who had blessed their tribe with waterbending abilities might also possess the power to preserve a life that seemed destined to end before it had properly begun. The ritual they performed was not based on established tradition but on spontaneous spiritual connection, their love for their daughter creating a bridge between human need and celestial compassion that neither side could resist. Tui's decision to share life force with the mortal child was unprecedented in recorded history, but somehow felt inevitable to all who witnessed the moment of connection. The white koi fish rising from the depths of the sacred pool to touch the baby's forehead with gentleness that spoke of infinite patience and wisdom. The energy that passed between spirit and child was visible as soft light that seemed to emanate from within both beings, their life forces intertwining in ways that would forever link Yue's existence to the moon spirit's cosmic responsibilities. The name her mother chose, Yue, meaning moon, acknowledged not just the source of her salvation, but the spiritual destiny that her rescue had created, her identity becoming inseparably connected to the celestial body whose spirit had preserved her life through sharing its own essential nature. From her earliest moments, she would display characteristics that reflected this deep spiritual connection: wisdom beyond her years, intuitive understanding of waterbending principles, and a serenity that spoke of consciousness touched by cosmic perspective. The 16 years that followed her miraculous healing were marked by Yue's gradual understanding of her unique position between human and spirit worlds, her awareness growing that the life she lived was not entirely her own, but held in trust for purposes that would eventually require its return to preserve something greater than individual existence. Her education combined traditional princess training with spiritual instruction that prepared her for responsibilities that no previous Water Tribe royal had ever been expected to bear. The love that grew between Yue and Sokka during those crucial hours when the Fire Nation's siege threatened everything they both held dear was both tragic and beautiful, their connection demonstrating how completely mortal hearts could open, even when cosmic forces conspired to make lasting happiness impossible. Their brief romance carried all the intensity that comes from understanding that time is limited, that whatever joy they could create together would have to sustain them through separation that might prove eternal. Admiral Zhao's obsession with destroying the moon spirit represented the ultimate corruption of waterbending's original philosophy. His desire to eliminate an entire element source, showing how far Fire Nation thinking had strayed from any understanding of spiritual balance or elemental harmony. His research into the spirit's mortal forms was motivated not by curiosity or respect, but by the kind of militaristic thinking that viewed all supernatural forces as either weapons to be acquired or threats to be eliminated. The attack on the Spirit Oasis violated every principle of spiritual interaction that Water Tribe culture had developed across centuries of coexistence with Tui and La. Zhao's blade striking not just at a fish, but at the cosmic order that maintained balance between spiritual and physical worlds. The moment of the moon spirit's death sent shockwaves through every waterbender alive, their connection to their element suddenly severed, as if essential parts of themselves had been amputated without warning or anesthesia. The darkness that followed was more than mere absence of moonlight, but rather the spiritual void left by the destruction of consciousness that had existed since before human civilization, cosmic emptiness that threatened to expand until it consumed everything that depended on lunar influence for existence and meaning. The world itself seemed to hold its breath during those terrible moments when the natural order stood on the brink of permanent disruption that could cascade into complete ecological collapse. Yue's recognition of her unique ability to restore what had been lost came not through careful analysis, but through spiritual intuition that bypassed rational thought to access wisdom that her connection to the moon spirit had been slowly building throughout her lifetime. Her decision to sacrifice her mortal existence was made with the kind of certainty that comes from understanding cosmic necessity, from seeing clearly how individual life could serve universal purposes when willingly offered in service of greater harmony. The transformation that followed her willing death was witnessed by all present as manifestation of love so pure and complete that mortal categories became inadequate to describe what they were seeing. Her human consciousness merging with celestial spirit to create something new that honored both origins while transcending the limitations that had previously defined each separately. The gentle light that surrounded her as life force transferred from human form to cosmic essence carried all the warmth and compassion that had marked her brief mortal existence. La's response to its companion's restoration was immediate and overwhelming, the ocean spirit's grief and rage giving way to relief so profound that its rampage ceased instantly, destructive power transforming back into protective force that had always been its true nature. The cosmic balance that seemed permanently shattered by Zhao's violence was restored through sacrifice that demonstrated how completely love could overcome hatred when offered without reservation or condition. The Admiral's death in the jaws of the ocean spirit was swift, but somehow felt inevitable. Cosmic justice, asserting itself through natural forces that would no longer tolerate his presence in a world where spiritual balance had been restored, through such complete demonstration of selfless devotion. His body disappeared beneath waters that had reclaimed their sacred nature, his spirit presumably facing whatever judgment awaited those who had devoted themselves to destroying rather than preserving the cosmic order. The moon that rose again in the sky carried within its light the essence of a mortal princess who had chosen universal welfare over personal happiness, her sacrifice transforming her into guardian of all waterbenders, while ensuring that the element's spiritual foundation would remain secure for all future generations. The tides that resumed their eternal rhythm now carried added significance, each rise and fall marked by consciousness that remembered what it meant to love so deeply that death became preferable to allowing that love's object to remain destroyed. The water-bending techniques that developed in the years following Yue's transformation carried new spiritual depth, masters discovering that their connection to their element had been strengthened rather than merely restored, that human willingness to sacrifice for cosmic harmony had created additional channels through which lunar and oceanic energies could flow into mortal consciousness. The healing arts in particular seemed to carry enhanced power, as if the princess's final act of healing had blessed all subsequent attempts to use water for restoration and preservation of life. The philosophical implications of Yue's sacrifice would influence water tribe culture for generations, her example demonstrating how completely individual identity could merge with cosmic forces without losing essential humanity, how mortal love could become the foundation for immortal service to principles that transcended personal desire. The moon's face, when viewed by those who knew her story, seemed to carry traces of her gentle expression, cosmic body transformed into eternal reminder of love's ultimate victory over destruction. The temple that was eventually built around the sacred oasis where these miraculous events had unfolded became pilgrimage destination for waterbenders from throughout the world, their visits reinforcing their connection to the spiritual sources of their abilities while honoring the sacrifice that had preserved those sources for future generations. The eternal dance of Tui and La continued in waters that now held additional sacred significance, their movements encoding not just original waterbending principles, but also the story of how mortal courage could preserve cosmic harmony against forces that seemed impossible to overcome. And so the moon continues its celestial journey, its light carrying across all waters the blessing of consciousness that chose universal service over individual survival, the spirit of a princess whose love proved stronger than death and whose sacrifice ensured that the ancient dance between humanity and element would continue until the end of time itself. Each tide a reminder that true power comes not from domination, but from willing partnership with forces greater than individual understanding can encompass completely. In the deepest chambers beneath mountains that had stood since the world's foundation was laid, where darkness was complete and silence absolute save for the whispered movement of earth through earth, there dwelt the first masters of the solid element, creatures whose very existence embodied the principles that would one day flow through human consciousness to create the art known as earthbending. The Badgermoles had inhabited these subterranean kingdoms for countless millennia before the first human foot pressed against stone, their massive forms moving through solid rock as easily as fish through water, their blindness transformed from limitation into advantage through mastery of perception that transcended the crude mechanism of sight. These ancient beings possessed bodies that seemed designed by cosmic intelligence specifically for their role as Earth's first disciples, their powerful claws capable of carving tunnels through the hardest granite, while their sensitive whiskers detected vibrations so subtle that the fall of a pebble miles away registered in their consciousness like thunder in silence. Their fur carried the scent of deep places where no wind had ever blown, where minerals concentrated over geological ages created atmospheres that would have been toxic to surface dwellers, but provided exactly the environment that badger mole physiology required for optimal health and spiritual development. The seismic sense that badger moles developed through necessity became the foundation upon which all advanced earthbending would eventually be built. Their ability to perceive the world through vibrations in stone and soil, creating understanding of Earth's true nature that sight-based creatures could never achieve through conventional observation. They learned to read the stories that stone could tell about pressure and time, about the slow dance of continents across the planet's surface, about the patient accumulation of sediment that built mountains grain by grain across ages that made human lifespans seem like heartbeats. Their territorial behaviors reflected earthbending's core philosophical principles. Thousands of years before humans discovered those same truths through careful study and gradual enlightenment, their social structures built around concepts of stability, patience, and the kind of strength that comes from deep connection to unchanging foundations rather than surface adaptability. Badger mole communities were organized around the understanding that true power came from being immovable when movement would serve no useful purpose, from knowing when to yield and when to stand firm, from recognizing that apparent passivity could become devastating effectiveness when properly timed and precisely applied. The tunnels they carved beneath the earth were not mere transportation routes, but three-dimensional expressions of earthbending philosophy made manifest in stone and empty space, their passages following natural fault lines and mineral veins in ways that worked with geological forces rather than against them. Each tunnel represented years of careful planning and patient excavation, the badger mole's understanding of structural engineering surpassing anything human civilization would achieve for centuries after their first contact with these subterranean masters. The hunting techniques that badger moles employed against the wolf bats and other creatures that shared their underground domain demonstrated earthbending's potential for both protective and aggressive applications. Their ability to create sudden pitfalls or reshape tunnel walls, giving them advantages that their prey's superior speed and agility could not overcome through conventional tactics. Yet their approach to predation was characterized by the same patience and precision that marked all their activities, their attacks perfectly timed and devastatingly effective without being unnecessarily violent or wasteful. Into this ancient underground civilization came two young humans whose love for each other would prove stronger than the political boundaries and cultural hatreds that their surface-dwelling peoples had maintained across generations of conflict and suspicion. Oma and Shu were children of villages that had been enemies for so long that no one could remember the original cause of their enmity, their forbidden romance representing hope for reconciliation that practical politics and tribal pride made impossible to achieve through conventional diplomatic channels. The mountain that separated their two communities was considered impassable by everyone who lived in its shadow, its steep slopes and treacherous weather patterns, creating a barrier that seemed designed by nature itself to keep certain peoples apart permanently. But love has always possessed the power to reveal possibilities that fear and prejudice render invisible, and the young couple's determination to be together led them to explore options that more cautious or less motivated individuals would never have considered seriously. Their first encounter with badger moles occurred during a desperate attempt to find passage through caves that everyone knew existed, but no one had ever successfully navigated. The underground passages, rumored to extend completely through the mountain, but also said to be haunted by creatures whose nature and intentions remained unknown to surface dwellers. The darkness that swallowed their torches within moments of entering the cave system was more complete than anything they had ever experienced, but their love provided courage that fear alone could never have supplied. The badger moles they encountered deep within the mountain's heart were initially as startled by human presence as the humans were by their first glimpse of the Earth's original masters. These massive creatures whose movements through solid stone seemed to defy every law of physics that surface experience had taught them to expect. But something in the young couple's desperate need to reach each other resonated with the badger mole's own understanding of devotion and persistence. Their recognition that these humans shared their commitment to overcoming obstacles through patience rather than force. The learning that followed was not formal instruction, but rather gradual absorption of principles through observation and imitation. Oma and Shu, watching how badger moles moved Earth through extension of will rather than application of physical strength, how they sensed structural weaknesses in stone through vibrations that revealed internal stress patterns invisible to surface examination. The humans' progress was slow and often frustrating, their surface-dwelling reflexes constantly interfering with their attempts to achieve the kind of spiritual stillness that earthbending required. The breakthrough that allowed them to move their first stones came not through intellectual understanding but through emotional necessity. Their desperate need to create a meeting place where their love could exist without interference from their people's ancient animosity, providing the motivation that academic study alone could never have supplied. The chamber they carved together became the first human earthbending achievement, its walls shaped by hands guided by hearts that had learned to work with stone's natural tendencies rather than fighting against geological reality. The tunnel system that grew from this initial success was expanded over months of secret meetings, each passage representing new discoveries about earthbending's potential, while serving the practical purpose of allowing their relationship to develop away from the political pressures that surface visibility would have created. The labyrinth they created became increasingly sophisticated as their skills improved, its design incorporating defensive features that would protect their secret from discovery while providing multiple routes between their villages that could serve various purposes. The techniques they developed during this period of intensive practice and emotional motivation would later become fundamental earthbending forms, their innovations emerging from necessity rather than theoretical study, but proving remarkably effective when applied to various challenges that earthbending masters would face throughout subsequent centuries. Their approach emphasized subtlety and precision over raw power, their understanding that earthbending's greatest strength lay in working with natural forces rather than overwhelming them through superior force. The war that eventually claimed Shu's life was not the result of their peoples discovering their secret romance, but rather the natural progression of conflicts that had been building for generations. Political tensions finally erupting into violence that neither love nor earthbending could prevent once momentum toward destruction had passed beyond any individual's capacity to redirect. The young man's death was random and meaningless in the way that war deaths often are. His life ending not through heroic sacrifice, but through being in the wrong place when violence erupted around him. Oma's grief at losing her beloved was transformed into rage that demonstrated earthbending's potential for destruction when properly motivated and skillfully applied. Her single-handed assault on both armies simultaneously, showing how completely the element could respond to emotional intensity when channeled through technical mastery and philosophical understanding. The devastation she wreaked upon the battlefield was comprehensive and terrifying, her earthbending creating geological changes that would remain visible for centuries as reminders of what human emotions could accomplish when focused through elemental power. But it was in the aftermath of her display of raw power that Oma demonstrated earthbending's true potential for positive transformation. Her decision to end the senseless conflict between their peoples through creating something beautiful rather than simply destroying what had caused her pain. The city that rose from the battlefield where her love had died was named Oma Shu in honor of both lovers, its architecture incorporating earthbending techniques that turned defensive necessity into artistic expression of lasting beauty. The founding of Omashu established precedents for how earthbending could serve constructive rather than merely destructive purposes. The city's design demonstrating how human creativity could work with geological realities to create living spaces that enhanced rather than violated natural systems. The mail delivery system that became the city's most famous feature was inspired by Bajamol tunnel networks. Its use of gravity and carefully calculated angles, allowing packages to travel throughout the urban area without requiring human carriers to navigate complex street systems. The cultural impact of Oma and Shu's story extended far beyond their immediate historical moment, their romance becoming the foundation myth for earthbending instruction throughout the Earth Kingdom, while their techniques were studied and refined by masters who understood that their innovations had emerged from emotional authenticity rather than academic analysis. The ballads that preserved their memory emphasized the connection between love and earthbending mastery, the way genuine feeling could unlock possibilities that intellectual understanding alone could never access. The Bajamols themselves became revered figures in Earth Kingdom culture, their images appearing in architecture, ceremonial objects, and artistic expressions that honored their role as the original earthbending masters, while acknowledging their continued presence in the deep places where human civilization rarely penetrated. Statues of Bajamols were carved from the finest stone available, their forms stylized but recognizable, their blind eyes somehow conveying the wisdom that came from perceiving the world through senses that sight-dependent beings struggled to comprehend fully. The Earth Kingdom's royal throne was designed to incorporate Bajamol imagery in ways that reminded rulers of the patience and stability that their position required. The seat of power literally resting on foundations that honored the original masters whose teachings made earthbending civilization possible. The symbolism was both aesthetic and philosophical, suggesting that legitimate authority came from connection to Earth's deepest principles rather than from surface displays of wealth or military might. Centuries later, when the Earth Rumble tournaments began attracting audiences who appreciated earthbending as entertainment rather than spiritual discipline, Bajamols were employed as Zambonis to clear debris from the ring between matches, their presence serving practical purposes while maintaining connection to earthbending's sacred origins. The irony of using the original masters as cleanup crew was not lost on those who understood earthbending's true significance. But the Bajamols themselves seemed content with any role that allowed them to demonstrate their abilities while remaining close to the earthbending community. The young Toph Beifong's encounter with Bajamols during her childhood represented a return to earthbending's original educational methods, her learning occurring through direct observation and emotional connection rather than through formal instruction designed for sighted students. Her parents' overprotectiveness had created circumstances similar to those that Oma and Shu had faced, isolation and restriction motivating her to seek alternatives that more conventional approaches to earthbending education could never have provided. The cave where Toph first encountered her teachers was dark and quiet in ways that her sheltered surface life had never allowed her to experience. The complete absence of visual stimulation, creating conditions where her other senses could develop without interference, from sight-based assumptions about how perception should function. The Bajamols she discovered there recognized in her a fellow creature whose blindness was opportunity rather than limitation, whose alternative approach to understanding the world aligned with their own seismic-based consciousness. The seismic sense that Toph learned from her underground teachers was not simply technique, but rather a completely different way of experiencing reality, her perception expanding to encompass vibrations that traveled through solid matter to create three-dimensional understanding that was in many ways superior to vision for earthbending purposes. The sensitivity she developed allowed her to detect lies through changes in heart rate and breathing patterns, to sense approaching danger through footstep variations, to perceive structural weaknesses in buildings through subtle vibration analysis. The metal bending that Toph would later develop grew directly from her badger mole-influenced understanding of Earth's true nature, her seismic sense, enabling her to perceive the earth elements present in refined metals, while her teacher's philosophy of working with natural tendencies rather than against them provided the conceptual framework necessary for manipulating substances that other earthbenders considered completely foreign to their element. The rescue mission that Team Avatar undertook in the cave system, where Oma and Shu had first learned earthbending, created opportunities for Sokka to discover Badger Mole's unexpected appreciation for music, his inadvertent concert, demonstrating how deeply these creatures responded to rhythmic vibrations that resonated with their seismic-based perception of reality. The songs that calmed and delighted the hunting badger moles suggested connections between earthbending and artistic expression that formal training rarely explored systematically. The nomads who accompanied Team Avatar through the tunnel system brought their own musical traditions into contact with badger mole sensibilities, their instruments creating sounds that these underground masters found pleasing enough to interrupt their hunting activities in order to listen more closely. The impromptu concert that resulted from this cultural exchange demonstrated how music could serve as universal language between species, whose normal means of communication were completely incompatible. The ride that the badger moles provided to their musical guests was both practical assistance and expression of appreciation, their powerful bodies carrying the humans through tunnels that would have taken days to navigate on foot, while their seismic sense ensured safe passage through passages where wrong turns could result in fatal falls or encounters with hostile creatures. The experience of traveling through solid earth on badger mole back was unlike anything the surface dwellers had ever imagined possible, their underground journey revealing perspectives on their world that conventional travel could never provide. During Avatar Korra's era, when technological advancement had transformed Republic City into a modern metropolis where bending abilities served industrial purposes as often as traditional ones, the badger moles, who lived in the city zoo, represented connection to earthbending's ancient origins that urban development threatened to obscure completely. Their presence in captivity was both a sad reminder of how far human civilization had moved from its original relationship with elemental masters, and hope that those connections could be maintained even under radically changed circumstances. Prince Wu's discovery that badger moles responded to singing recalled Sokka's earlier experience, while demonstrating that musical communication between humans and Earth's original masters remained possible even when political bends, crises created circumstances that seemed to make such cultural exchanges impossible. His ability to befriend the zoo badger moles through vocal performance provided exactly the kind of assistance that desperate circumstances required. Their cooperation enabling evacuation efforts that conventional resources could not have accomplished. The tunneling that the badger moles accomplished beneath Republic City during Kuvira's invasion was both practical engineering and artistic expression, their passages following principles that their species had developed across millennia of underground construction, while serving immediate tactical needs that human defenders could not have met through conventional earthbending. Technique. Their assault on the mecha suits demonstrated how traditional earthbending philosophy could be applied to modern warfare with devastating effectiveness. The protection that the badger moles provided to Prince Wu and other evacuees during their underground journey through the threatened city showed how completely these creatures remained committed to their ancient role as Earth's guardians. Their instinctive understanding that their abilities carried responsibilities for protecting those who could not protect themselves Their actions during the crisis demonstrated that the original master's devotion to preserving life and preventing unnecessary suffering had not diminished, despite centuries of reduced contact with human civilization. The tunnels that the Badgermoles created during the invasion became permanent additions to Republic City's infrastructure, their passages providing emergency evacuation routes and underground transportation alternatives that human engineering could never have designed or constructed with comparable efficiency. The network they left behind served as lasting tribute to their species' contribution to earthbending development, while providing practical benefits that would serve the city's population for generations to come. And so the Badgermoles continue their ancient work in the deep places of the earth. Their patient excavation and careful construction, maintaining the foundations upon which all earthbending knowledge ultimately rests, their blind eyes seeing truths that surface dwellers struggle to perceive, their powerful bodies moving through stone with grace that demonstrates how completely consciousness can merge with element when ego surrenders to natural law and individual will aligns itself with cosmic principles that govern the slow dance of continents across the patient face of the eternal earth. In ages beyond mortal memory, when the world was young and the boundaries between elements were still being written by forces that shaped reality according to principles too vast for human comprehension, there soared through skies, unmarked by war or conquest, the most magnificent beings ever to master the sacred art of firebending. Dragons moved through ancient atmospheres with grace that made their massive forms seem weightless, their wings casting shadows across landscapes that had never known the scream of war machines or the bitter taste of smoke from burning cities, their breath carrying not the promise of destruction but the warm essence of life itself made manifest in flame. These primordial masters of fire understood their element in ways that transcended the crude applications that later generations would mistake for true firebending mastery. Their consciousness connected to cosmic forces that governed the relationship between energy and matter, between the spark of life and the eternal dance of creation and transformation. Each dragon was simultaneously individual creature and living embodiment of firebending philosophy, their very existence proving that fire's highest purpose was not to consume, but to kindle, not to destroy, but to illuminate the darkness that ignorance and fear cast across the world. The civilization that dragons built during those golden centuries before human contact was based on principles that would later form the foundation of the Sun Warriors' teachings, though the full depth of draconic wisdom would never be completely accessible to minds that experienced existence through the limitations of mortal consciousness. Their cities were carved into mountainsides that caught the sun's rays at optimal angles, their architecture designed to channel solar energy in ways that supported both physical comfort and spiritual development, for beings whose lifespans were measured in millennia rather than decades. The social structures that governed dragon communities reflected their understanding that true authority came from wisdom rather than raw power, their hierarchies based on depth of spiritual insight and commitment to preserving the sacred knowledge that connected all firebenders to the original source of their abilities. Elder dragons served as teachers and philosophers, their accumulated experience providing guidance for younger generations, while their continued growth in understanding demonstrated that even the most advanced consciousness could continue developing across centuries of patient study and practice. The breath that dragons wielded was not mere combustion, but rather concentrated life force, expressing itself through elemental fire, their flames carrying healing properties when properly applied, while possessing destructive potential that exceeded anything human firebenders would ever achieve through conventional techniques. The rainbow fires that the most advanced dragon masters could produce contained colors that had no names in human languages, energies that could purify spiritual corruption while leaving physical matter unharmed, when the dragon's intention was focused on healing rather than destruction. The philosophical teachings that dragons preserved through oral tradition emphasized fire's role as the element of passion and transformation, its capacity to change matter from one state to another, making it uniquely suited for beings who understood that growth required the courage to abandon familiar forms in favor of new possibilities that could only be achieved through voluntary surrender of previous limitations. Their wisdom encompassed not just technical mastery of flame manipulation, but deep understanding of how emotional states influenced elemental expression, how spiritual purity determined whether fire would serve constructive or destructive purposes. The meditation techniques that dragons practiced involved extended periods of motionless contemplation during which their massive forms would remain absolutely still, while their consciousness explored realms of understanding that existed beyond normal sensory experience. Their breathing so controlled that observers might wonder whether they remained alive until the subtle glow of inner fire revealed that profound spiritual work was continuing beneath their apparently dormant exterior. These sessions could last for days or weeks, their duration determined by the complexity of the insights being pursued rather than external schedules or social expectations. The hunting methods that dragons employed against prey were characterized by the same precision and efficiency that marked all their activities, their attacks perfectly calculated to provide necessary nutrition, while avoiding unnecessary suffering for the creatures whose lives sustained their physical existence. They understood that taking life carried spiritual responsibility that required respectful acknowledgement of what was being sacrificed. Their feeding practices, incorporating ceremonies that honored the interconnectedness of all living things, while accepting the reality that physical existence required participation in natural cycles of consumption and renewal. The songs that dragons sang during their aerial gatherings were unlike any music that human ears would ever hear, their vocalizations incorporating harmonics that resonated with natural forces in ways that could influence weather patterns and seasonal transitions. These performances served multiple purposes simultaneously: artistic expression that satisfied their aesthetic sensibilities, spiritual practice that maintained their connection to cosmic forces, and practical magic that helped maintain the ecological balance upon which all life depended for continued flourishing. But it was in their relationship with the sun itself that dragons demonstrated the deepest aspects of firebending mastery, their consciousness capable of direct communion with the stellar consciousness that provided all fire with its ultimate source and spiritual significance. The sunrise meditations that began each day involved not just observation of celestial movement, but active participation in the solar energy that bathed their world in light and warmth. Their breathing synchronized with cosmic rhythms that human awareness could barely detect even under optimal conditions. The decline that would eventually reduce the mighty dragon civilization to a handful of survivors began not with direct assault, but with gradual changes in human consciousness that transformed fire from sacred element into tool of conquest and domination. The corruption of fire-bending philosophy, creating spiritual pollution that affected dragons even when they had no direct contact with human societies. The aggressive applications of their element that human firebenders developed created disharmony in cosmic forces that dragons depended upon for their own spiritual and physical well-being. Firelord Sozin's systematic campaign to eliminate dragons from the world was motivated by the same militaristic thinking that would eventually lead to the air nomad genocide. His understanding of power so corrupted that he viewed these ancient masters as threats to human dominance rather than treasures whose wisdom could elevate firebending to heights that purely human innovation could never achieve. The dragon hunts he organized were presented as sporting events that would demonstrate Fire Nation's superiority, while providing trophies that symbolized conquest over natural forces. The techniques that Sozin developed for dragon hunting incorporated the most advanced military technology available during his era, his forces using coordinated attacks and specialized equipment designed specifically to overcome advantages that dragons' size and aerial mobility normally provided against ground-based opponents. The hunting parties he dispatched were composed of the most skilled firebenders in his military, their mission considered so important that failure was not merely discouraged, but treated as treason against the Fire Nation's imperial destiny. The slaughter that followed was systematic and comprehensive. Entire dragon communities eliminated before they fully understood the nature of the threat facing them, their ancient wisdom disappearing with each death, while their accumulated knowledge died with consciousness that had spent centuries refining understanding of firebending's deepest mysteries. The mountain caves that had served as dragon nurseries for millennia fell silent, their walls still warm from fires that would never burn again, their chambers echoing with the absence of songs that had maintained cosmic harmony for longer than human civilization had existed. Iroh's encounter with the last dragon he would kill was unlike the routine destruction that characterized most hunting expeditions. His meeting with this ancient master, creating a spiritual crisis that would influence every subsequent decision he made about how power should be wielded and what purposes justified the taking of life. The dragon's eyes held intelligence and sorrow that made continuing the attack feel like murder rather than hunting, but military conditioning and cultural expectations overcame moral hesitation until the deed was completed and could never be undone. The remorse that followed Iroh's final dragon kill began a transformation in his consciousness that would eventually lead him to abandon the aggressive firebending philosophy that Fire Nation culture had developed in favor of approaches that honored fire's original nature as life-giving rather than life-destroying force. His subsequent travels throughout the world were motivated partly by desire to escape memories of what he had done, but also by growing understanding that true firebending mastery required wisdom that his own culture could no longer provide adequately. The tea that became Iroh's passion during his later years was not merely beverage but meditation practice, his careful attention to temperature and timing reflecting principles he had learned from observing how dragons controlled their inner fire, with precision that made every breath an act of conscious artistry. The Jasmine Dragon tea shop he would eventually establish served as sanctuary where firebending philosophy could be explored without the aggressive applications that military training emphasized exclusively. The White Lotus masters who gathered around Iroh during his exile years recognized in him someone who had moved beyond conventional Fire Nation, thinking to embrace understanding that connected him to firebending traditions that predated the war's corruption of their element's sacred nature. His inclusion in their secret organization reflected their recognition that wisdom could emerge from experience of profound regret as easily as from academic study or spiritual discipline. The decision to claim that he had killed the last dragons was motivated by desire to protect beings whose survival was more important than his reputation for military achievement. His willingness to accept responsibility for genocide he had not committed, demonstrating how completely his values had shifted from personal glory toward preservation of what remained valuable. In a world that seemed determined to destroy everything beautiful and wise, Ran and Shaw, the last true dragons, had survived the systematic extermination of their species through isolation so complete that even Fire Nation intelligence networks could not locate their hidden sanctuary, Their mountain retreat protected by spiritual defenses that deflected attention away from their presence while maintaining connection to cosmic forces that sustained their continued existence, despite the spiritual pollution that human corruption had introduced into their element's natural flow. Their survival was more than mere self-preservation, but rather sacred responsibility to maintain knowledge that would otherwise disappear completely when their deaths ended the last direct connection to firebending's original masters and authentic teachings. Every day of continued existence was victory against forces that sought to reduce fire to mere tool of destruction. Their presence, ensuring that alternative approaches to elemental mastery remained possible for future generations willing to abandon corrupted practices in favor of authentic wisdom. The Sun Warriors, who served as intermediaries between Dragon Masters and human students, had preserved fragments of original firebending philosophy through oral traditions and ceremonial practices that maintained connection to pre-war understanding while adapting ancient teachings to circumstances that the dragons who had originally developed those techniques could never have anticipated. Their hidden civilization represented hope that authentic wisdom could survive even systematic efforts to eliminate it completely. The trial that Zuko and Aang underwent when they sought dragon instruction was designed to test not just technical skill but spiritual worthiness. The ancient master's assessment going beyond surface abilities to encompass character traits and motivations that determined whether human students could be trusted with knowledge that previous generations had used for conquest and destruction rather than growth and preservation. The chamber where this trial took place was carved from living rock by dragonfire, applied with artistic precision that transformed utilitarian space into sacred architecture, the walls themselves telling stories of firebending's golden age, when dragons and humans had worked together to maintain cosmic balance rather than competing for dominance over natural forces. The altar, where Aang and Zuko demonstrated their abilities, was positioned to catch sunlight at angles that revealed hidden patterns in the stone, celestial timing that emphasized fire's connection to cosmic rather than merely terrestrial sources. The initial flames that both students produced were judged not for their heat or size, but for their spiritual quality. The dragon's ancient eyes, capable of perceiving intentions and emotional states that shaped elemental expression in ways that technical analysis could never detect or evaluate accurately. The fear and uncertainty that both humans carried into the trial was visible in their fire as surely as physical impurities would be apparent in contaminated water. Their nervous energy creating distortions that revealed how much spiritual purification would be required before authentic mastery became possible. The moment when Ran and Shaw accepted the students' offerings marked a turning point not just in individual instruction but in the relationship between dragons and humanity. These ancient masters choosing to share their wisdom despite centuries of betrayal and systematic extermination that would have justified permanent rejection of all human contact. Their decision to teach, rather than destroy, demonstrated forgiveness that transcended individual grievance to encompass cosmic understanding of how restoration could emerge from destruction when consciousness chose healing over revenge. The rainbow flames that erupted from the dragon's coordinated demonstration were unlike any fire that either student had ever witnessed, their colors extending beyond visible spectrum into energetic ranges that human perception could barely register, while their warmth penetrated not just physical bodies but spiritual essence, in ways that left permanent changes in how both recipients understood their element's true nature and potential applications. The lesson that these flames embodied went far beyond technique or philosophy to encompass direct transmission of consciousness. The dragons sharing not just knowledge but actual experience of what firebending could become when ego surrendered to cosmic forces, and individual will align itself with universal principles that governed energy's transformation, from potential to kinetic expression. The understanding that Aang and Zuko gained through this experience would influence every subsequent application of their abilities, their firebending forever changed by contact with authenticity. The restoration of Zuko's abilities that followed this spiritual initiation was more complete than mere return of previous skill levels, his fire now carrying qualities that his earlier training had never achieved because it had been based on anger and competition, rather than understanding and harmony with natural forces. The flames he could now produce were simultaneously more powerful and more controlled, their increased intensity balanced by precision that made destructive applications unnecessary, even when facing opponents whose abilities might otherwise require overwhelming force to defeat. The breath of fire technique that dragons taught through direct demonstration showed how firebending could be used for artistic expression rather than combat application. Their controlled exhalation, creating patterns in the air that were simultaneously beautiful and functional, their flames serving as medium for three-dimensional painting that used heat and light to create temporary sculptures of pure energy. The flying that dragons accomplished through combination of wing power and firebending represented integration of physical and spiritual abilities that human firebenders could never achieve, but could learn to appreciate as demonstration of what became possible when consciousness fully embraced its elemental nature, rather than treating bending as external skill to be acquired and wielded. Their aerial grace was meditation in motion, spiritual practice that happened to involve navigation of three-dimensional space. The healing applications of dragonfire were perhaps the most profound aspect of their teaching, their flames capable of purifying spiritual corruption and restoring natural balance to consciousness that had been damaged by trauma or misguided training. The techniques they demonstrated for using fire to repair rather than destroy challenged every assumption that military-focused education had created about their element's inherent nature and appropriate applications. And so the ancient masters continue their vigil in hidden places where the sun's light falls pure and unfiltered by the smoke of human ambition, their presence ensuring that fire's sacred nature remains accessible to those who seek wisdom rather than power, whose flames burn bright with life rather than dark with conquest, whose understanding encompasses the truth that genuine mastery comes not from dominating their element but from serving its highest purposes, with devotion that transforms individual consciousness into worthy vessel for cosmic forces that connect all burning hearts across the vast expanse of space and time, in the golden ages before war darkened the skies above the four nations, when peace flowed across the world like gentle winds carrying the scent of cherry blossoms and mountain snow. There soared through pristine atmospheres the most magnificent creatures ever to master the sacred art of movement through three dimensions, beings whose very existence embodied the principles that would one day flow through human consciousness to create airbending as spiritual discipline rather than mere elemental manipulation. The flying bison possessed bodies that seemed designed by cosmic intelligence specifically for their role as Air's first disciples, their massive forms moving through aerial currents with grace that made their considerable size seem weightless, their 6 legs paddling through invisible rivers of atmosphere, while their broad tails served as rudders for navigation through wind patterns, too subtle for earthbound creatures to detect. These ancient masters of air understood their element in ways that transcended the crude applications that military thinking would later impose upon airbending instruction. Their consciousness naturally aligned with atmospheric forces that governed weather patterns and seasonal transitions across the world's varied climates and geographical regions. Each sky bison was simultaneously individual creature and living embodiment of airbending philosophy, their flight demonstrating how complete harmony with natural forces could transform apparent limitation into transcendent ability that exceeded anything achievable through struggle against elemental resistance. The herds that gathered during seasonal migrations were sights of such overwhelming beauty that witnessing their passage was considered spiritual experience equivalent to meditation or prayer. Their coordinated movements, creating wind patterns that could influence weather systems across entire continents, while their songs carried messages between groups separated by thousands of miles of mountain ranges and ocean expanses. The aerial territories they claimed extended from the highest peaks to the cloud layers where oxygen grew thin enough to challenge all but the most adapted respiratory systems, their domain encompassing vertical spaces that no other large creatures could inhabit successfully. The intelligence that sky bison displayed in their natural environment went far beyond instinctual behavior to encompass problem-solving abilities and emotional depth that approached human consciousness in complexity, while maintaining connection to natural wisdom that civilized thinking often abandoned in favor of artificial constructs and social conventions. Their memory for weather patterns, migration routes, and safe landing sites was precise enough to guide their flights across continental distances without ever becoming lost or disoriented. Their navigation incorporating celestial observations and magnetic sensitivity that created internal maps of extraordinary accuracy and detail. The social structures that governed sky bison communities reflected airbending principles of cooperation and mutual support, their hierarchies based on wisdom and experience rather than physical dominance or aggressive competition. Elder bison served as guides and teachers for younger generations. Their knowledge of air currents and seasonal patterns passed down through demonstrations and shared flights that provided education disguised as recreational activity, their patient instruction ensuring that essential survival skills were transmitted across generations without creating stress or competitive pressure. The breathing techniques that sky bison employed during flight were fundamentally connected to airbending mastery, in ways that human practitioners would spend years studying and attempting to replicate. Their respiratory rhythm synchronized with wing movements to create optimal efficiency in converting metabolic energy into sustained aerial mobility. The controlled exhalation that powered their most demanding maneuvers demonstrated how conscious breath regulation could enhance physical capabilities beyond normal biological limitations when properly coordinated with elemental awareness. The nesting sites that sky bison selected for raising their young were invariably located at high altitudes where air currents provided natural protection from predators, while offering ideal conditions for teaching flight skills to calves, whose wing development required careful, graduated exposure to increasingly challenging atmospheric conditions. The nursery caves they carved into mountainsides using controlled air blasts showed sophisticated understanding of aerodynamics and structural engineering, their architecture designed to channel wind flow in ways that supported rather than hindered the delicate process of learning aerial navigation. The bond between adult bison and their offspring extended far beyond typical mammalian parent-child relationships to encompass spiritual connection that lasted throughout the younger animal's entire lifetime. Their emotional communication, maintaining cohesion within family groups, even when physical separation was required by territorial needs or seasonal migration patterns. The games that adults played with calves were simultaneously entertainment and education, their aerial acrobatics teaching essential skills through activities that emphasized joy and creativity rather than fear or competition. Into this ancient aerial civilization came human observers whose spiritual sensitivity and natural curiosity led them to recognize that these magnificent creatures possessed wisdom that could elevate human consciousness beyond earthbound limitations. and conventional approaches to understanding the world's fundamental nature. The air nomads who first established contact with sky bison did so through patient observation and respectful approach, their recognition that true learning required invitation rather than demand creating possibilities for interspecies cooperation that aggressive or exploitative attitudes could never have achieved. The temples that air nomads eventually built were positioned at altitudes where regular interaction with sky bison became natural rather than forced, their architecture incorporating design elements that provided comfortable resting places for creatures whose size required accommodation that conventional human structures could never offer. The courtyards and landing platforms that became central features of air temple design reflected understanding that shared spaces needed to serve both species equally, their dimensions and orientations carefully calculated to support the aerial approaches that sky bison preferred for landing and departure. The philosophical teachings that emerged from centuries of human-bison interaction emphasized partnership rather than domination, cooperation rather than conquest, the understanding that true mastery came from learning to work with natural forces rather than attempting to impose human will upon elemental energies that operated according to cosmic principles too vast for individual consciousness to comprehend fully. The air nomad approach to airbending was shaped by observation of how sky bison moved through their element with effortless grace, their techniques incorporating lessons learned from creatures whose entire existence was devoted to perfecting aerial mobility. The meditation practices that air nomads developed often involved shared silence with sky bison companions, their breathing synchronized with the great creature's respiratory rhythms, while their consciousness merged with aerial awareness that encompassed wind patterns, atmospheric pressure changes, and subtle variations in air density that affected flight performance. These sessions could last for hours, their duration determined by the depth of understanding being pursued rather than external schedules or social expectations. The dietary habits that air nomads adopted reflected not just personal ethical choice, but recognition that sky bison were strictly vegetarian creatures whose spiritual purity was maintained through avoiding harm to other living beings. Their commitment to non-violence, extending beyond mere preference to encompass fundamental understanding of interconnectedness that made causing unnecessary suffering spiritually damaging to any consciousness capable of recognizing universal kinship between all forms of life. The games that air nomads played with their sky bison companions were simultaneously recreational activities and advanced airbending training, their airball tournaments and aerial races providing opportunities to develop skills that formal instruction alone could never teach, while strengthening emotional bonds that made human-bison partnerships transcend simple utility to encompass genuine friendship based on mutual respect and shared joy in aerial mastery. Appa's early life among the Eastern Air Temple's sky bison herd was marked by the same playful curiosity and natural intelligence that characterized all members of his species, his large size and gentle temperament, making him popular among both human and bison companions, while his unusual longevity and resilience suggested spiritual qualities that would prove essential for surviving circumstances that no sky bison in recorded history had ever been forced to endure. The bond that formed between Appa and the young airbender Aang was recognized immediately by temple elders as something special, their connection demonstrating the kind of perfect harmony that air nomad philosophy described as ideal, but rarely achieved so completely. The selection process that brought them together was not formal ceremony, but rather mutual recognition. Aang's offering of a simple apple creating trust that would endure across a century of separation and hardship, while Appa's acceptance of this gift established partnership that transcended normal categories of pet ownership or animal training to encompass genuine friendship between equals. who happened to belong to different species. The apple that sealed their bond was more than food, but rather symbol of sharing and mutual care that would define their relationship throughout all subsequent adventures and challenges. The training that Appa received during his years at the Air Temple was not coercive instruction, but rather collaborative exploration of possibilities that his natural abilities and Aang's developing airbending skills could achieve when properly coordinated and mutually supportive. Their practice sessions emphasized communication and trust rather than obedience and control, their aerial maneuvers growing increasingly sophisticated as their understanding of each other's capabilities and intentions developed through countless hours of shared flight and ground-based interaction. The saddle that was eventually crafted for Appa's back was designed not just for human comfort, but for optimal weight distribution and aerodynamic efficiency, its construction incorporating materials and techniques that honored sky bison anatomy while providing practical features that would support extended travel and emergency situations. The reins attached to this saddle were purely ceremonial, their presence acknowledging human expectations, while both parties understood that real guidance came through emotional communication and mutual trust rather than physical control. The grooming rituals that became part of their daily routine served multiple purposes simultaneously. Practical maintenance of Appa's massive coat and cleaning of areas that his own flexibility could not reach, bonding activities that strengthened emotional connection through shared attention and care, and meditation practices that taught both participants about patience, service, and the joy that comes from caring for another being without expecting immediate reward or recognition. The century that Appa spent frozen beneath the waves was experienced not as unconscious suspension, but rather as dream state awareness that maintained connection to Aang's spiritual journey while preserving his physical form against the natural aging processes that would otherwise have claimed his life long before his friends returned to active consciousness. The ice that encased them both was not mere frozen water, but rather crystallized spiritual energy that sustained their life forces through stasis that transcended normal biological limitations. The awakening that followed their discovery by Katara and Sokka was disorienting for both Aang and Appa, their return to consciousness revealing a world transformed by war and loss that challenged every assumption they had developed about how civilized beings should treat each other and the natural environment that supported all life. The immediate recognition of their bond, despite century-long separation, demonstrated how deeply their partnership had been established, their reunion occurring without hesitation or uncertainty, despite the traumatic circumstances of their preservation. The travels that followed their awakening tested every aspect of their relationship while providing opportunities for Appa to demonstrate intelligence and emotional depth that exceeded anything their new companions had expected from what they initially assumed was simply an unusually large mount, rather than genuine partner in their mission to restore balance to a world torn apart by conflict and hatred. His protective instincts toward all members of Team Avatar showed how completely his loyalty extended beyond his primary bond with Aang to encompass anyone who shared their goals and values. The capture that separated Appa from his friends during their journey through the Earth Kingdom was traumatic, not just because of physical confinement, but because of emotional isolation from the human companions who had become his family, their absence creating spiritual emptiness that no amount of physical comfort could address adequately. The Sandbenders who sold him to Fire Nation traders understood his commercial value, but had no appreciation for the emotional cost that such separation imposed on a creature whose entire existence was built around relationships and shared experience. The rescue that eventually reunited Appa with Team Avatar required not just physical liberation but emotional healing from trauma that had challenged his faith in human goodness while demonstrating his resilience and capacity for forgiveness despite suffering that would have broken weaker spirits. The joy that marked their reunion was visible to everyone present as complete vindication of bonds that transcended species boundaries to create family relationships based on choice rather than biological connection. The battles that Appa participated in during the war's final stages showed how completely he had accepted responsibility for protecting not just Aang, but all innocent beings threatened by Fire Nation aggression. His aerial mobility and massive strength, providing tactical advantages that conventional military thinking could never have anticipated or prepared to counter effectively. His willingness to risk his own safety for others demonstrated moral courage that many humans struggled to achieve despite their supposed intellectual and spiritual advantages. The Air Temple Island sanctuary that eventually became Appa's home during the post-war reconstruction period provided both practical shelter and symbolic significance, his presence there serving as living reminder that air nomad culture could survive and flourish, despite systematic efforts to eliminate it completely. The other sky bison who gradually joined him on the island represented hope that their species could recover from near extinction, while maintaining the spiritual qualities that made them suitable partners for airbenders committed to peace and spiritual development. The offspring that Appa eventually sired with other surviving sky bison carried forward not just genetic heritage but cultural knowledge that their species had preserved through oral tradition and instinctual behavior, their natural abilities, ensuring that future generations of airbenders would have access to the authentic teaching methods that had shaped air nomad civilization during its golden age. Each calf born to the recovering herd was celebrated as victory against forces that had sought to eliminate not just individual lives, but entire ways of understanding the world's spiritual nature. The meditation practices that developed around human-bison interaction during the Reconstruction years emphasized mutual learning rather than one-sided instruction. Air acolytes discovering that sky bison consciousness could teach them about patience and presence, while their own spiritual development contributed to the healing of trauma that war had inflicted on creatures who had never understood why. Humans would choose destruction over harmony. The flying techniques that new generations of airbenders learned from sky bison instruction preserved essential elements of traditional air nomad education, while adapting to circumstances that the original masters could never have anticipated, their teaching methods proving flexible enough to serve students whose cultural backgrounds and life experiences differed dramatically from those of pre-war air nomad children, yet maintained core principles that connected all practitioners to their element's authentic nature. The songs that sky bison sang during their evening gatherings were unlike any music that human ears would ever produce, their vocalizations incorporating harmonics that resonated with atmospheric conditions in ways that could influence local weather patterns while serving as communication method between individuals separated by vast distances. These performances served multiple purposes simultaneously: artistic expression that satisfied their aesthetic sensibilities, practical magic that helped maintain ecological balance, and social bonding that reinforced herd cohesion across generations. The intelligence that sky bison displayed in their interactions with human partners went far beyond simple animal training to encompass emotional understanding and problem-solving abilities that challenged conventional assumptions about the nature of consciousness and communication between species. Their capacity for empathy and their willingness to sacrifice personal comfort for their friends' welfare demonstrated moral development that put many humans to shame, while inspiring those who witnessed it to reconsider their own approaches to relationships and responsibility. And so the sky bison continue their eternal flight through atmospheres that carry both memory of ancient peace and hope for future harmony. Their massive forms cutting through wind currents with grace that demonstrates how completely consciousness can merge with element when ego surrenders to natural law. Their presence in the world, serving as reminder that true mastery comes not from dominating the forces around us, but from learning to dance with them in partnership that honors both individual capability and universal connection. Their songs echoing across distances that separate islands and continents, while uniting all who hear them in appreciation for the beauty that emerges when different forms of consciousness choose cooperation over conflict in the endless dance of life through the boundless sky. In the primordial ages that preceded the establishment of elemental boundaries and the separation of human and spirit worlds, when consciousness itself was still learning the difference between potential and manifestation, there existed beings of such immense wisdom and spiritual magnitude that their very presence shaped the fundamental laws governing how energy would flow through physical reality for all subsequent eras. The lion turtles moved through oceans that had never known the taste of industrial pollution, their shells rising from pristine waters like floating continents where entire civilizations could flourish in harmony with forces that would later be divided into the four distinct elements, their ancient eyes holding memories of cosmic birth and the patient unfolding of universal principles across eons that made the longest human lifespans seem like single heartbeats in eternity's vast rhythm. These primordial guardians possessed bodies that defied conventional understanding of biological possibility, their shells extending for miles in every direction, while supporting ecosystems complete enough to sustain thousands of human inhabitants across generations of peaceful existence. The cities that grew upon their backs were not built through conquest of natural forces, but rather through cooperation with living architecture that adjusted itself to accommodate human needs while maintaining the spiritual balance necessary for both species to thrive in partnership that honored the essential nature of each participant. The wisdom that lion turtles had accumulated through direct observation of reality's formation transcended anything that later philosophical traditions would develop through abstract reasoning or theoretical speculation, their understanding encompassing the fundamental principles that governed how consciousness could interact with energy to create what would eventually be recognized as bending abilities. Yet their knowledge was not academic but rather experiential, gained through millennia of active participation in cosmic processes that shaped matter and spirit according to laws too vast for individual minds to comprehend completely. The energy bending that lion turtles wielded was not manipulation of external forces, but rather direct interaction with the life energy that animated all conscious beings, their techniques accessing the spiritual foundation upon which elemental abilities would eventually be built, while maintaining connection to source principles that transcended any single element's limitations or characteristics. This original bending art was simultaneously more powerful and more subtle than anything humans would later develop, its effects extending beyond physical manipulation to encompass transformation of consciousness itself. The cities that flourished on lion turtle shells developed cultures that reflected their unique circumstances, their inhabitants learning to live in harmony with both their massive hosts and the spiritual forces that flowed through every aspect of their elevated existence. The architecture that grew in these aerial sanctuaries emphasized integration with natural systems rather than domination over environmental conditions, their buildings designed to channel energy flows in ways that supported both human comfort and the lion turtles' continued health and spiritual development. The humans who inhabited these floating cities possessed no elemental bending abilities in the conventional sense. their consciousness not yet divided into the specialized categories that would later define waterbending, earthbending, firebending, and airbending as separate disciplines with distinct philosophical foundations and technical requirements. Instead, they relied upon their lion-turtle hosts to provide protection and elemental manipulation when circumstances required intervention in natural processes or defense against spiritual entities that occasionally threatened their peaceful communities. The relationship between humans and lion turtles during this golden age was characterized by mutual respect, an understanding that transcended the typical boundaries between different species, their partnership representing perfect synthesis of human creativity and ancient wisdom that honored both participants' essential nature while creating possibilities that neither could achieve independently. The humans provided companionship and purpose that enriched the lion turtle's eternal existence, while the great beings offered protection and spiritual guidance that elevated human consciousness beyond purely material concerns. The spirit world during this primordial period was not separate realm accessible only through special portals or advanced spiritual techniques, but rather parallel dimension that interpenetrated physical reality so completely that crossing between them was as natural as walking from one room to another. Spirits moved freely among human communities, their presence creating educational opportunities and occasional challenges that taught valuable lessons about consciousness, morality, and the proper relationship between individual desires and universal harmony. One's transformation from ordinary human into the first avatar began not with heroic intention or spiritual calling, but through simple curiosity and compassion that led him to question established social hierarchies and conventional assumptions about how power should be distributed within communities that claimed to be based on principles of justice and mutual support. His theft of food from the Chu family's warehouse was motivated by witnessing hunger among his city's poorest inhabitants, while abundant resources remained hoarded by those who already possessed more than they could possibly use productively. The punishment that followed one's arrest was exile from the only home he had ever known, banishment from the Lion Turtle City, where his family had lived for generations, while the great being who served as their host remained neutral in human disputes that did not directly threaten the community's overall welfare, spiritual health. The decision to leave him in the spirit world, rather than simply relocating him to another part of the shell, was intended to ensure that his rebellious influence would not spread to other cities whose stability depended on maintaining established social arrangements. The spirit wilds where Wan found himself abandoned were simultaneously more beautiful and more dangerous than anything his sheltered city existence had prepared him to navigate successfully, their landscapes shifting according to principles that operated beyond normal physical laws. While their inhabitants possessed powers and motivations that human understanding could barely begin to comprehend adequately, the survival skills he was forced to develop during his early days in this realm required adaptability and resourcefulness that conventional education had never encouraged or supported. The ape spirits who initially served as Wan's companions and protectors were curious about human nature and consciousness, their decision to assist him reflecting both compassion for his obvious vulnerability and genuine interest in learning about how his species approached problems and relationships. Their hunting techniques and survival strategies were adapted to spirit world conditions that differed dramatically from physical realm environments, their knowledge proving essential for avoiding dangers that could destroy unprepared visitors from other dimensions. The power that the lion turtle granted Wan before his exile was temporary elemental ability intended to provide basic protection against spirit world hazards while he learned to navigate his new environment. The firebending he received was meant to serve as tool rather than permanent transformation of his essential nature. The technique that allowed this power transfer was energy bending applied in ways that created temporary rather than lasting changes in consciousness, its effects designed to fade once the immediate need for protection had passed. The mastery that one developed through constant practice and life or death application of his borrowed abilities exceeded anything the lion turtle had anticipated when granting temporary access to elemental power. His dedication to perfecting firebending techniques, transforming what was intended as survival tool into genuine expertise that approached the level of natural-born benders. His innovations in combat applications and defensive strategies emerged from necessity rather than formal instruction, his creativity compensating for lack of traditional training. Rava's initial encounter with Wan occurred during his attempt to prevent conflict between spirits whose dispute threatened to escalate into violence that could destabilize the delicate balance maintaining harmony between different factions within the spirit world community. His intervention was motivated by compassion rather than political calculation. His recognition that escalating conflict would harm innocent beings regardless of which side ultimately prevailed in their struggle for dominance or territorial control. The spirit of light and peace that Rava embodied was locked in eternal struggle with her dark counterpart Vatu, their conflict representing cosmic forces that maintained universal balance through dynamic tension between opposing principles that required each other's existence to prevent stagnation or chaos from overwhelming reality's fundamental structure. Their battle had been ongoing since before physical reality achieved stable form, their alternating victories and defeats creating cycles that influenced everything from seasonal changes to the rise and fall of civilizations. Wan's decision to release Vatu from his prison was made without understanding the full implications of his action. His desire to end what appeared to be unjust imprisonment, overriding warnings about consequences that his limited experience could not adequately evaluate. The dark spirit's escape unleashed forces that had been contained for 10,000 years. His freedom, creating opportunities for chaos and destruction that threatened not just individual communities, but the fundamental stability of both spirit and physical worlds. The war that erupted following Vaatu's liberation pitted spirits against each other in conflicts that transcended normal categories of territorial dispute or resource competition, their battles representing fundamental disagreement about how reality should be organized and whether consciousness should be allowed to develop according to individual choice or controlled through authoritarian systems that prioritized order over freedom. The destruction that followed affected both dimensions simultaneously, their interconnectedness ensuring that violence in one realm created corresponding damage in the other. The harmonic convergence that approached would determine whether light or darkness would dominate the coming age. This cosmic event, occurring once every 10,000 years, when spiritual energy reached peak concentration, and the barrier between dimensions became thin enough to allow unprecedented transformation of fundamental natural laws. The outcome would influence not just immediate political arrangements, but the basic principles governing how consciousness could interact with reality for millennia to come. One's quest to master all four elements before harmonic convergence was motivated by growing understanding that only someone capable of channeling complete elemental power would possess sufficient strength to contain Vaatu's influence while restoring balance between order and chaos. His journey between lion turtle cities required crossing vast distances through both physical and spirit worlds, his travels exposing him to dangers and educational opportunities that no previous human had ever experienced. The airbending lion turtle that granted one his second element did so reluctantly, their ancient wisdom recognizing that accumulating multiple elemental powers within single consciousness created risks that had never been tested safely. The technique required for this transfer was more complex than simple energy bending. involving precise calibration of energy flows that could easily result in death or permanent spiritual damage if any aspect of the process was miscalculated or improperly executed. The earth and water elements that Wan subsequently acquired from their respective lion turtle guardians were obtained under increasingly dangerous circumstances, his body and spirit struggling to contain forces that were never intended to coexist within individual consciousness. The physical pain and spiritual distress he experienced during each transfer grew progressively worse, his determination to complete his mission being tested against suffering that threatened to exceed his capacity for endurance. Rava's decision to permanently fuse with Wan's consciousness was motivated by recognition that their combined strength was the only force capable of preventing Vaatu from plunging both worlds into eternal darkness. Her willingness to sacrifice her independent existence demonstrating love for all conscious beings that transcended personal survival instincts. The fusion process was unprecedented in cosmic history, its success requiring perfect harmony between human and spirit consciousness that had never been achieved or attempted previously. The avatar state that resulted from this merger was not simply enhanced bending ability, but rather access to cosmic perspective that encompassed understanding, accumulated across lifetimes of experience and spiritual development, the combined consciousness capable of perceiving reality from viewpoints that purely human awareness could never achieve independently. The power that flowed through this connection was both exhilarating and terrifying, individual identity threatened by immersion in forces that operated beyond personal limitations or conventional moral categories. The final battle with Vaatu at the Tree of Time tested every aspect of Wan's training and preparation, while requiring spiritual courage that went beyond physical bravery to encompass willingness to risk complete annihilation in service of principles that transcended individual survival or happiness. The Dark Spirit's power had grown enormously during his period of freedom, his influence corrupting both spirits and humans, while creating chaos that threatened to become a permanent feature of reality's fundamental structure. The victory that Wan achieved came at tremendous personal cost, his successful imprisonment of Vaatu requiring sacrifice of normal human existence in favor of cosmic responsibility that would extend across multiple lifetimes of service to universal balance. The separation of spirit and human worlds that he implemented was intended to prevent future conflicts, while allowing each dimension to develop according to its essential nature without interference from forces that operated according to incompatible principles. The portals that remained open between dimensions served as reminders of original unity, while providing controlled access that prevented complete isolation between realms whose health depended on maintaining some level of connection and communication. The spirits who chose to remain in the physical world became bridges between dimensions, their presence ensuring that humanity would not lose complete contact with spiritual wisdom and perspective that their development required for continued growth. The lion turtle's withdrawal from active involvement in human affairs was motivated by recognition that their role as protectors and providers had become unnecessary once humans possessed elemental bending abilities that could meet their practical needs for defense and environmental manipulation. Their departure was gradual and ceremonial, each great being's farewell marking the end of an era while blessing human independence and self-sufficiency that had been their ultimate goal throughout millennia of patient guardianship. The energy-bending knowledge that the lion turtles possessed was preserved through careful transmission to select individuals whose spiritual development and moral character made them suitable guardians of techniques that could be catastrophically dangerous if misused or corrupted by selfish motivations. The responsibility of maintaining this knowledge required wisdom that few humans could develop, their understanding encompassing not just technical proficiency, but deep appreciation for cosmic forces that energy bending could access and potentially disrupt. The avatar cycle that began with one's death and subsequent reincarnation ensured that the wisdom gained through his unique experiences would remain available to future generations, while allowing individual personalities and cultural backgrounds to influence how cosmic responsibilities were understood and implemented. Each new avatar would face challenges that reflected their historical period's specific needs, while maintaining connection to accumulated wisdom that transcended any single lifetime's limitations or perspective. The memories that each avatar carried from previous incarnations were not complete preservation of past personalities, but rather selective access to experiences and insights that remained relevant to current circumstances, challenges. The spiritual state required for accessing these memories demanded temporary surrender of individual ego that few avatars achieved easily, their resistance to losing personal identity, often preventing them from fully utilizing resources that their cosmic role made available. And so the lion turtles continue their patient journey through oceans that have witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, their ancient eyes holding memories of humanity's childhood when consciousness was simpler but wisdom was scarce, their shells no longer bearing cities but still supporting ecosystems that demonstrate how different forms of life can cooperate in harmony when guided by understanding that transcends individual survival to encompass universal welfare. Their presence in the world, serving as reminder that power without wisdom leads inevitably to destruction, while wisdom without power remains forever frustrated, unable to transform good intentions into beneficial actions that serve the greater good across the vast expanse of time and space. In the shadowed realms that exist between the material world and the pure spirit dimension, where consciousness takes forms that defy mortal understanding, and ancient powers dwell in patient contemplation of mysteries that predate civilization itself. There move beings whose influence upon the development of bending arts extends far beyond the widely celebrated animal masters, their contributions to human elemental mastery flowing through channels so subtle and complex that even experienced spiritual practitioners struggle to perceive the full scope of their impact on techniques that seem purely physical, but carry within them seeds of wisdom that could only have been planted by intelligences operating according to principles that transcend ordinary categories of teaching and learning. The face stealer known as Ko represents perhaps the most enigmatic and terrifying of these secondary influences, his ancient consciousness having observed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, while accumulating a collection of stolen identities that encompasses beings from every era of recorded history, and many that preceded human memory entirely. His lair beneath the roots of the ancient tree in the spirit world serves as repository of experiences and knowledge that spans millennia of interaction between human and spirit consciousness, each face in his possession carrying memories and skills that include advanced bending techniques developed by masters whose names have been forgotten by their own descendants. The Avatar Kuruk's tragic encounters with Ko revealed how completely the face stealer's influence could penetrate human affairs, his theft of the young woman Umi's face creating wounds in Kuruk's spirit that would eventually contribute to his early death and shortened avatar cycle. The waterbending techniques that Kuruk employed in his desperate attempts to rescue his beloved incorporated innovations born from emotional intensity that pushed his abilities beyond conventional limitations, his grief and rage creating new applications of his element that would unconsciously influence subsequent waterbending development through the spiritual connections that link all practitioners of the same art across time and space. The The psychological manipulation that Ko employs against visitors to his domain requires absolute emotional control that forces rapid advancement in spiritual discipline. Among those who survive encounters with his presence, their necessity to maintain perfect neutrality while facing existential terror, creating meditation skills that enhance bending performance in ways that conventional training could never achieve. The survivors of such meetings carry within their consciousness an understanding of emotional regulation that transforms their relationship with their chosen element, their techniques gaining precision and power that reflects hard-won mastery over internal states that most benders never learn to control adequately. The Mother of Faces, Ko's benevolent counterpart, influences bending development through entirely different mechanisms that emphasize healing and restoration rather than terror and loss. Her ability to grant new identities and erase traumatic memories, creating opportunities for spiritual rebirth that can unlock previously inaccessible aspects of elemental mastery. The transformation she provides goes beyond mere cosmetic alteration to encompass fundamental changes in consciousness that can reveal hidden potential or remove psychological barriers that had prevented full expression of natural abilities. The Forgetful Valley, where the Mother of Faces maintains her sanctuary, has become legendary among earthbenders for its connection to seismic disturbances that seem to respond to emotional states rather than geological forces. The terrain shifting and reforming according to principles that suggest deep integration between spiritual energy and physical matter. The earthbending techniques that develop in regions influenced by her presence often incorporate elements of healing and restoration that conventional Earth Kingdom instruction rarely emphasizes, their practitioners learning to use their element for reconstruction and renewal, rather than purely defensive or aggressive applications. The forest spirits that dwell in the great woods of the Earth Kingdom have contributed to the development of specialized plant-bending techniques through their intimate connection with growing things and the cycles of natural growth and decay that govern all vegetation. Their consciousness permeates root systems and branch networks that span vast distances, creating communication networks that allow information and energy to flow between distant locations in ways that parallel the spiritual connections that link all living beings across the boundaries that separate individual identity from universal consciousness. The plant benders who learn to work with these forest spirits discover that their abilities extend far beyond simple manipulation of existing vegetation to encompass acceleration of growth processes, enhancement of nutritional content in food crops, and even resurrection of plants that have died from disease or environmental damage. Their techniques require patience and spiritual sensitivity that conventional earthbending instruction rarely develops. Their connection to life force energy, creating hybrid abilities that blend earthbending principles with healing arts traditionally associated with waterbending mastery. The river spirits that inhabit the major waterways throughout the world serve as conduits for advanced waterbending knowledge that flows downstream from source regions where ancient masters develop techniques that subsequent generations have forgotten or abandoned in favor of more immediately practical applications. The songs that these spirits sing during their nocturnal travels carry encoded instructions for manipulating water in ways that seem impossible according to conventional understanding. Their melodies creating resonance patterns that can influence liquid behavior across vast distances. The waterbenders who learn to perceive and interpret these spiritual songs often develop abilities that their teachers cannot explain or replicate, their techniques incorporating elements that seem to violate established principles while producing results that prove their effectiveness beyond any doubt. Their mastery often includes capacity for long-distance water manipulation, ability to purify contaminated liquids through spiritual rather than physical filtration, and skill at creating ice formations that maintain stability under conditions that should cause immediate melting. The mountain spirits that inhabit the highest peaks of the world maintain connection to earthbending traditions that predate human civilization, their knowledge encompassing techniques for working with metal and crystal that were developed through direct observation of geological processes operating across timescales that dwarf human lifespans. The caves where these spirits dwell often contain natural formations that demonstrate earthbending principles applied with precision that human masters spend decades trying to achieve. Their crystalline structures and perfectly balanced stone arrangements serving as three-dimensional textbooks for those capable of reading their lessons. The metal-bending innovations that eventually emerged through Toph's breakthrough were influenced by spiritual insights that she absorbed unconsciously during her childhood encounters with cave-dwelling spirits whose presence she sensed but never consciously acknowledged. Their understanding of metal's essential earth nature provided the conceptual foundation that made her technical breakthrough possible, while their examples of crystal manipulation demonstrated possibilities that would inspire her later development of techniques for working with increasingly purified materials. The sky spirits that dance through the upper atmosphere during auroral displays carry knowledge of airbending techniques that operate on meteorological scales, their movements creating wind patterns and pressure systems that demonstrate how individual consciousness can influence global weather patterns when properly aligned with cosmic forces. The songs they sing while riding solar wind currents incorporate harmonics that can be detected by sensitive airbenders. Their melodies, providing instruction for advanced techniques that conventional teaching methods struggle to convey effectively. The airbending masters who develop sensitivity to these celestial teachings often gain abilities that seem supernatural even by avatar standards. Their techniques including capacity for long-range weather influence, ability to create sustained pressure differentials across continental distances, and skill at generating atmospheric phenomena that can affect entire regions simultaneously. Their mastery requires spiritual development that goes far beyond normal airbending instruction, their consciousness expanded to encompass perspectives that individual human awareness can barely sustain without losing connection to personal identity. The fire spirits that inhabit volcanic regions maintain direct connection to the planet's molten core and the titanic energies that drive continental drift and mountain formation. Their consciousness, encompassing understanding of fire's role in geological processes that operate across millions of years of planetary evolution. The techniques they have developed for manipulating lava and working with volcanic gases demonstrate firebending applications that purely human innovation could never discover independently, their mastery encompassing abilities that transcend conventional categories of elemental manipulation. The lavabenders who occasionally emerge within the Earth Kingdom population often trace their unusual abilities to childhood exposure to volcanic spirits, whose influence subtly modified their elemental attunement during crucial developmental periods. Their techniques represent synthesis of earthbending and firebending principles that conventional training cannot achieve, their abilities requiring simultaneous mastery of opposing philosophical approaches that most practitioners find impossible to reconcile within single consciousness. The spiritual crossing points where multiple elemental influences converge create unique opportunities for developing hybrid techniques that combine principles from different bending traditions, their locations often becoming pilgrimage destinations for masters seeking to expand their abilities beyond conventional limitations. The energy patterns that manifest at these sites can temporarily enhance natural abilities while providing direct experience of how elemental forces interact when not artificially separated by human categorization and specialized training. The meditation practices that develop around these spiritual crossing points often produce practitioners whose abilities defy easy classification, their techniques incorporating elements from multiple traditions while remaining true to essential principles that govern elemental mastery. Their teaching methods emphasize direct spiritual experience over theoretical knowledge, their instruction focusing on consciousness development rather than mere technical proficiency in manipulating external forces. The healing spirits that inhabit places where great suffering has occurred work to restore balance and wholeness through techniques that blend spiritual counseling with elemental manipulation, their methods demonstrating how bending abilities can serve therapeutic purposes that extend far beyond simple medical treatment. Their understanding of trauma's impact on elemental connection has influenced the development of healing arts that address spiritual as well as physical wounds, their techniques creating possibilities for recovery that conventional medicine cannot achieve. The seasonal spirits that oversee the transition between different phases of natural cycles maintain knowledge of how elemental abilities fluctuate in response to cosmic influences, their understanding encompassing the subtle ways that astronomical events affect bending performance, while providing guidance for optimizing spiritual development according to celestial timing. Their teachings emphasize patience and acceptance of natural rhythms, rather than forcing constant progress according to arbitrary human schedules. The guardian spirits that protect sacred sites throughout the world serve as repositories of elemental knowledge that was preserved during periods when human civilization faced destruction or decay, their consciousness maintaining techniques and philosophical insights that might otherwise have been lost forever. The locations they inhabit often become centers for elemental pilgrimage and advanced instruction, their presence creating spiritual atmospheres that enhance learning and spiritual development for properly prepared visitors. The trickster spirits, whose pranks and jokes sometimes frustrate human visitors, serve educational purposes that are not immediately obvious, their challenges forcing practitioners to develop adaptability and creative problem-solving skills that rigid training methods cannot provide. The techniques that emerge from successfully navigating their tests often incorporate elements of improvisation and spontaneous innovation that prove essential during crisis situations where conventional approaches prove inadequate. And so the great web of spiritual influence continues to shape the development of elemental arts through channels that remain largely invisible to casual observation. The secondary masters working through subtle guidance and indirect teaching that honors human autonomy while providing resources for growth and development that purely material instruction could never supply. Their presence in the world, ensuring that bending arts remain connected to cosmic principles rather than degenerating into mere physical techniques, divorced from the spiritual foundations that give them meaning and authentic power, that serves universal harmony rather than individual ambition or temporary political advantage. In the centuries that followed the establishment of traditional bending disciplines and their foundational philosophies, human ingenuity and spiritual exploration began to push against the boundaries that conventional understanding had established around elemental manipulation, their innovations emerging not through systematic research or academic study, but rather through moments of desperate necessity, creative breakthrough, and the kind of profound spiritual insight that transforms impossible dreams into achievable reality. These unique disciplines represented evolution beyond the original four elements, while remaining true to fundamental principles that governed all authentic bending arts, their development demonstrating how individual consciousness could transcend inherited limitations when properly motivated and spiritually prepared for transformation. Metal bending emerged from the intersection of desperate necessity and revolutionary insight when Toph Beifong found herself trapped within a metal cage that conventional earthbending wisdom declared completely impervious to her abilities. Her predicament, forcing her to reconsider fundamental assumptions about her element's nature, while her seismic sense revealed truths that theoretical knowledge had obscured beneath layers of categorization and artificial separation. The breakthrough that followed was not mere technical innovation, but rather philosophical revolution that redefined earthbending's scope and potential, while demonstrating how perceived limitations often reflected incomplete understanding rather than actual natural law. The metal that Toph learned to manipulate was not foreign substance, but rather earth in refined form, its essential nature unchanged by human processing. Despite surface appearances that suggested complete transformation from its original state, her ability to perceive the earth particles that remained embedded within steel and iron was enhanced by seismic sensitivity that conventional earthbending instruction had never developed systematically, her blindness creating perceptual advantages that sighted practitioners could barely comprehend. Even after witnessing demonstrations of her unprecedented abilities, the technique that allowed metal bending required spiritual flexibility that went beyond normal earthbending philosophy, practitioners needing to maintain connection to Earth's essential nature while working with materials that had been altered by fire and human intention in ways that seemed to violate natural processes. The mental discipline necessary for this synthesis demanded understanding that transcended simple adherence to established categories, their consciousness encompassing paradoxes that logical analysis could never resolve satisfactorily, but spiritual insight could navigate successfully. The bloodbending that Hama discovered during her imprisonment in Fire Nation facilities represented the darkest evolution of waterbending philosophy, her technique emerging from desperation and hatred that corrupted noble healing arts into instruments of domination and control, that violated every principle that had originally guided her elemental education. The full moon's enhancement of waterbending abilities created conditions where the water within human bodies could be manipulated directly, this discovery revealing possibilities that traditional masters had never explored because their moral development prevented them from considering such applications seriously. The psychological impact of bloodbending upon both practitioner and victim extended far beyond immediate physical effects to encompass spiritual corruption that could permanently damage the moral foundation necessary for authentic waterbending mastery. The technique's inherent violation of personal autonomy, creating karmic consequences that affected the user's relationship with their element in ways that conventional purification rituals could never completely heal. The power that bloodbending provided came at costs that few practitioners understood until the damage had already become irreversible. The resistance that bloodbending could encounter from victims whose spiritual development included strong meditation practices or elemental mastery demonstrated that consciousness itself could serve as defense against techniques that sought to override individual will through manipulation of biological systems. The psychological strength necessary for this resistance required years of spiritual development that most people never achieved, their vulnerability to bloodbending reflecting not weakness, but simply lack of specific preparation for threats that seemed purely theoretical until experienced directly. The lightning generation that advanced firebenders developed through study of natural electrical phenomena represented synthesis of scientific observation and spiritual practice that elevated their element beyond mere combustion to encompass electromagnetic forces that operated according to principles bridging physical and metaphysical realms. The technique required emotional balance and spiritual purity that few practitioners could maintain consistently, their inner state directly affecting their ability to channel energies that could prove instantly fatal if improperly controlled or misdirected. The meditation practices that supported lightning generation emphasized emptiness and release rather than the passionate intensity that characterized conventional firebending instruction, practitioners needing to achieve states of perfect calm and emotional neutrality that seemed contradictory to fire's essential nature, but actually represented deeper understanding of their element's relationship to cosmic forces. The breathing techniques that facilitated this spiritual state were derived from airbending philosophy, their integration demonstrating how authentic mastery required synthesis of insights from multiple elemental traditions. The lightning redirection that Iro developed through careful study of waterbending principles showed how techniques could be adapted across elemental boundaries when underlying philosophical foundations were properly understood, respectfully applied. His innovation represented not theft of foreign methods, but rather recognition that elemental separation was artificial construct that limited potential, while authentic mastery required understanding universal principles that operated through all forms of energy manipulation, regardless of their surface categorization. The lava bending that occasionally manifested within Earth Kingdom populations represented genetic convergence between earthbending and firebending lineages, their unique abilities emerging from ancestral mixing that created spiritual attunement capable of accessing both elements simultaneously. The practitioners who developed this rare ability often struggled with identity questions that conventional bending categories could not address adequately, their techniques requiring philosophical approaches that honored both elemental traditions while creating something entirely new. The emotional requirements for lava bending were particularly complex. Practitioners needing to maintain earthbending's patience and stability while accessing firebending's passion and transformative power, their consciousness encompassing contradictions that would drive most people toward mental instability if not properly balanced through spiritual practices that few teachers understood well enough to provide adequate guidance. The techniques they developed often reflected this internal synthesis, their lava manipulation demonstrating both Earth's endurance and fire's capacity for radical change. The combustion bending that emerged as specialized firebending application required spiritual development that approached supernatural levels, practitioners learning to focus their fire energy so precisely that it could create explosions at distant locations through pure mental concentration rather than physical flame projection. The technique demanded not just exceptional elemental mastery, but also perfect emotional control and spiritual purity that prevented the destructive power from corrupting the user's moral foundation or consuming their consciousness. Through contact with forces that transcended normal human limitations, the training necessary for combustion bending mastery was so demanding that most practitioners died during the learning process, their consciousness unable to withstand contact with cosmic forces that operated beyond individual ego, while their bodies proved inadequate vessels for energies that could reshape matter at molecular levels. The survivors of this brutal educational process often displayed personality changes that reflected their exposure to powers that transformed their understanding of reality and their relationship to ordinary human concerns and motivations. The plant bending that developed among earthbending populations living in forest regions represented synthesis of earthbending principles with deep ecological awareness, practitioners learning to work with living vegetation through techniques that honored both plant consciousness and mineral foundations that supported all terrestrial life. The abilities they developed included not just manipulation of existing plants, but enhancement of growth processes, improvement of nutritional content, and even restoration of vegetation that had been damaged by disease or environmental destruction. The spiritual requirements for plant-bending mastery included developing empathy with plant consciousness that most humans found extremely difficult to achieve, their techniques requiring understanding of botanical needs and growth cycles that conventional earthbending education rarely addressed systematically. The practitioners who achieved authentic plant-bending abilities often displayed personality traits that reflected their deep connection to living systems. Their behavior patterns incorporating patience and seasonal awareness that seemed strange to people accustomed to purely human timescales and motivational structures. The sand bending that developed among desert populations represented adaptation of earthbending principles to environmental conditions that conventional techniques could not address effectively, practitioners learning to work with granular materials that behaved according to fluid dynamics rather than solid mechanics. The abilities they developed included not just sand manipulation but enhanced navigation skills, water location techniques, and survival methods that enabled them to thrive in environments that would prove fatal to most other human populations. The cultural implications of sand-bending mastery extended beyond mere technical ability to encompass entire lifestyle adaptations that honored desert conditions while maintaining connection to earthbending traditions that had developed in more temperate climates. The communities that specialized in these techniques often displayed social structures that reflected their environment's demands. Their tribal organization, emphasizing mobility and resource conservation, while preserving knowledge that could only be transmitted through direct experience rather than theoretical instruction. The ice-bending specialization that emerged among water-bending populations living in polar regions represented refinement of traditional techniques to address environmental conditions that required unprecedented precision in temperature, control, and molecular manipulation. The abilities they developed included creation of permanent ice structures that could withstand summer temperatures, formation of complex crystalline patterns that served both artistic and functional purposes, and development of preservation techniques that could maintain food safety across extended periods without conventional storage methods. The philosophical foundations of ice-bending mastery emphasized patience and long-term thinking that reflected their environment's seasonal rhythms, practitioners learning to work with natural freezing cycles while developing abilities that could override environmental conditions when circumstances required intervention. Their techniques often incorporated elements of artistic expression that transformed purely utilitarian abilities into forms of spiritual practice that honored ice's unique beauty while serving practical needs that polar survival demanded. The healing applications that emerged from advanced ice-bending practice included pain management techniques that used controlled freezing to numb injured areas, preservation methods that could maintain biological tissue during surgical procedures, and restoration techniques that could repair frost damage in both human and plant systems. The practitioners who specialized in these applications often served as medical professionals whose abilities exceeded anything that conventional healing arts could provide. Their techniques requiring spiritual development that combined water-bending mastery with deep understanding of biological processes. The weather manipulation that some air-bending masters developed through advanced spiritual practice represented expansion of their element beyond localized applications to encompass atmospheric systems that operated across continental scales, their techniques requiring consciousness expansion that approached cosmic awareness while maintaining connection to individual identity. The abilities they achieved included influence over storm systems, capacity for long-range pressure manipulation, and skill at creating atmospheric phenomena that could affect entire regions simultaneously. The environmental applications of advanced bending disciplines often incorporated insights from multiple elemental traditions, practitioners learning to work with natural systems rather than simply manipulating isolated phenomena, while their techniques served ecological restoration and environmental protection goals that transcended narrow human interests. Their abilities represented evolution towards synthesis that honored all elements while serving universal principles that operated beyond conventional categories of political or cultural allegiance. And so the unique disciplines continue to evolve through individual breakthrough and collective experimentation, their development proving that elemental mastery has no final boundaries, save those that consciousness imposes upon itself through limited vision or insufficient spiritual development, their practitioners pushing beyond inherited assumptions to discover possibilities that await anyone willing to surrender conventional understanding in favor of direct experience of how cosmic forces operate when freed from artificial constraints and allowed to express their authentic nature through consciousness prepared to serve universal harmony rather than narrow personal ambition or temporary advantage. In the vast tapestry of human civilization that spread across the four nations during the centuries when elemental mastery flourished in countless variations and cultural expressions, the profound influence of geography, climate, and cultural philosophy created distinct regional approaches to bending that transformed the basic elemental disciplines into specialized arts, reflecting the unique spiritual and practical needs of diverse populations living under radically different environmental conditions. These variations emerged not through conscious design or systematic planning, but rather through generations of adaptation and refinement that honored both universal principles governing elemental manipulation and specific circumstances that shaped how those principles could be most effectively applied to serve community welfare and individual spiritual development. The Northern Water Tribe's mastery of their element was shaped by polar conditions that demanded unprecedented precision in ice manipulation and temperature control. Their techniques refined through centuries of surviving in environments where improper waterbending could mean the difference between shelter and exposure, between preserved food and starvation during the long months when hunting became impossible and stored supplies provided the only buffer against death. The massive ice structures that characterized their architecture required engineering knowledge that combined spiritual understanding with practical experience, their builders learning to create formations that could withstand seismic activity while maintaining stability under temperature variations that would destroy conventional construction. The healing arts that developed within Northern Water Tribe culture represented the pinnacle of waterbending's therapeutic applications, their masters learning to manipulate not just surface injuries but internal imbalances that affected circulation, organ function, and spiritual health in ways that conventional medicine could never address adequately. The training that produced these healers was rigorous and comprehensive, their education encompassing anatomy, spiritual development, and technical precision that required decades of study under masters whose knowledge had been accumulated across generations of careful observation and gradual refinement of techniques. The combat applications that Northern Waterbenders developed reflected their experience with Fire Nation raids and the necessity of defending static positions against mobile attackers, whose firebending gave them significant tactical advantage during daylight hours. Their techniques emphasized defensive formations and coordinated group tactics that maximized their numerical advantages, while compensating for individual limitations that made single combat against experienced firebenders extremely dangerous for all but the most exceptional practitioners. The Southern Water Tribe's approach to waterbending was shaped by different environmental pressures and cultural priorities, their techniques emphasizing mobility and adaptability that reflected nomadic lifestyle and the need to work with smaller quantities of available water in regions where ice formation was less predictable and reliable. The hunting applications that characterized their bending focused on practical utility rather than artistic expression, their methods designed to support survival needs while maintaining spiritual connection to their element's essential nature. The trauma that Fire Nation raids inflicted upon Southern Water Tribe culture created gaps in traditional knowledge transmission, that forced surviving waterbenders to develop innovative techniques without benefit of comprehensive formal instruction, their creativity compensating for missing elements of conventional education, while their determination to preserve their cultural identity motivated experimentation that might never have occurred under normal circumstances. The techniques that emerged from this cultural disruption often displayed rough effectiveness that lacked the refinement of northern methods, but possessed adaptability that proved valuable under combat conditions. The Earth Kingdom's vast territory and diverse geography created numerous regional variations in earthbending philosophy and technique, each area developing approaches that reflected local geological conditions while maintaining connection to fundamental principles that unified all legitimate earthbending practice. The differences between mountain, plains, desert, and coastal earthbending were so pronounced that practitioners from different regions sometimes struggled to understand each other's methods, despite sharing basic elemental affinity and cultural heritage. The metal-bending city of Ba Sing Se represented the ultimate expression of earthbending applied to urban development, their massive walls and complex infrastructure demonstrating how elemental mastery could serve architectural ambitions that exceeded anything previously attempted in human history. The techniques required for such construction involved thousands of coordinated earthbenders working according to precise specifications while maintaining the spiritual unity necessary for large-scale elemental manipulation that could reshape geography permanently. The rural earthbending traditions that developed in agricultural regions emphasized soil health and crop enhancement over combat applications, their practitioners learning to work with natural cycles and geological processes that supported sustainable farming practices. The techniques they developed included soil purification methods that could restore damaged farmland, irrigation systems that worked with natural water flow patterns, and preservation methods that could protect crops from weather damage or pest infestation. The mining applications that some Earth Kingdom regions specialized in required earthbending techniques adapted to working in confined spaces with limited visibility, while maintaining safety standards that prevented cave-ins or gas explosions. The practitioners who developed these abilities often displayed enhanced seismic sensitivity that allowed them to detect structural weaknesses or dangerous geological conditions before they became immediately threatening to worker safety or mining operations. The Fire Nation's military culture created earthbending variations that emphasized aggressive applications and rapid deployment, their techniques designed for battlefield effectiveness rather than artistic expression or spiritual development. The colonial earthbenders who settled in occupied territories often developed hybrid approaches that incorporated local geological knowledge while maintaining loyalty to Fire Nation tactical doctrine and strategic objectives. The swamp earthbending that emerged in wetland regions represented fusion of earthbending and plant-bending principles, practitioners learning to work with root systems and organic matter in ways that conventional earth-focused training never addressed systematically. The techniques they developed often blurred boundaries between earthbending and waterbending, their abilities encompassing manipulation of mud, organic debris, and living plant systems that defied easy categorization within traditional elemental frameworks. The Fire Nation's imperial expansion created opportunities for their bending traditions to encounter foreign influences while spreading their own techniques throughout occupied territories, this cultural exchange producing innovations that might never have emerged within purely homogeneous populations. The colonial firebenders, who spent generations in Earth Kingdom or Water Tribe territories, often developed abilities that incorporated local environmental adaptations while maintaining connection to Fire Nation philosophical foundations. The industrial applications that Fire Nation technology demanded created specialized firebending techniques focused on precision and sustained output rather than combat effectiveness or spiritual development. Their practitioners learning to maintain consistent flame temperature and energy output for manufacturing processes that required exact specifications. The masters who developed these abilities often worked in conditions that conventional firebending philosophy would have considered spiritually damaging. Their adaptation to industrial demands, creating techniques that served economic rather than traditional spiritual purposes. The lightning generation that Fire Nation nobility practiced represented the pinnacle of their element's refinement, the technique requiring not just exceptional spiritual development, but also cultural conditioning that emphasized emotional control and social superiority. The training that produced lightning benders was available only to individuals whose family background and personal characteristics met criteria that excluded the vast majority of Fire Nation population from even attempting to learn these advanced applications. The Air Nomad temples each developed distinct approaches to airbending instruction that reflected their geographical locations and cultural emphases. The differences between Eastern, Western, Northern, and Southern air temple traditions, creating diversity within unity that enriched overall air nomad civilization, while allowing individual temples to specialize in areas where their environmental conditions provided particular advantages for specific types of spiritual and technical development. The Eastern Air Temple's scholarly focus produced airbending masters whose techniques emphasized precision and theoretical understanding, their abilities often displaying mathematical elegance that reflected deep study of atmospheric physics and meteorological principles. The flying techniques that developed at this temple were particularly sophisticated, their practitioners achieving aerial maneuvers that required understanding of complex air pressure, relationships, and wind current interactions. The Western Air Temple's unique architectural features created opportunities for airbending training that no other location could provide. Their upside-down construction, requiring techniques adapted to unusual gravitational relationships and spatial orientations. The practitioners who trained in this environment often developed abilities that seemed impossible to airbenders educated at other temples, their mastery encompassing three-dimensional movement patterns that conventional instruction could never teach effectively. The Northern Air Temple's emphasis on communal decision-making and social harmony influenced their airbending techniques toward applications that supported group coordination and collective problem-solving, their methods often requiring multiple practitioners working in perfect synchronization to achieve effects that individual masters could never produce independently. The combat applications that developed at this temple emphasized defensive formations and coordinated retreat rather than aggressive engagement or individual heroics. The Southern Air Temple's focus on individual spiritual development produced airbending masters whose techniques displayed remarkable creativity and personal expression, their abilities often incorporating innovations that had never been attempted or even imagined by practitioners from other temples. The relationship between spiritual growth and technical mastery was particularly emphasized at this location, their training methods recognizing that authentic airbending required inner development that could not be separated from external skill acquisition. The cultural ceremonies that each region developed around bending practice reflected local religious traditions and social values, while maintaining connection to universal principles that governed elemental mastery across all legitimate traditions. The festivals and competitions that celebrated bending abilities served both entertainment and educational purposes, their public demonstrations creating opportunities for knowledge sharing while reinforcing cultural identity and community cohesion. The migration patterns that brought different bending traditions into contact with each other created opportunities for cultural exchange and technical innovation that enriched all participating communities, while occasionally creating conflicts over proper methods and philosophical approaches. The masters who traveled between regions often served as bridges between different traditions, their exposure to multiple approaches, creating synthesis that advanced overall understanding while respecting the integrity of individual cultural contributions. The trade relationships that developed between regions often involved bending-enhanced services and products that could only be created through elemental mastery. These economic connections, creating practical incentives for maintaining peaceful relationships, while providing opportunities for cultural exchange that went beyond simple commercial transactions. The specialized goods that each region produced through bending applications became symbols of their unique cultural achievements while serving practical needs that enhanced quality of life throughout the interconnected world. And so the great diversity of regional bending traditions continues to enrich human civilization through variations that honor both universal principles and local conditions, their development proving that authentic mastery can take countless forms while remaining true to essential spiritual foundations, their practitioners demonstrating how cultural adaptation and creative innovation can serve both individual development and community welfare, when guided by wisdom that encompasses both respect for tradition and openness to beneficial change that serves the greater good across all boundaries, that separate peoples who share common humanity and elemental gifts. In the deepest chambers of spiritual understanding that lie beneath the surface techniques and visible manifestations of elemental mastery, where consciousness touches the eternal principles that govern how energy flows between matter and spirit, across the vast expanses of cosmic time, there exists a profound philosophy that connects all authentic bending arts to their ultimate source in the divine architecture of reality itself. This spiritual foundation encompasses not merely the manipulation of external forces, but the transformation of internal awareness that makes such manipulation possible, while ensuring that power serves wisdom rather than corrupting the beast practitioner through contact with energies that transcend normal human limitations and moral categories. The chakra system that governs spiritual development within all conscious beings provides the fundamental framework through which elemental energies must flow to achieve their highest expression, each energy center corresponding to specific aspects of spiritual growth that determine whether bending abilities will serve constructive or destructive purposes. The original masters understood these connections intuitively, their consciousness naturally aligned with cosmic principles that human civilization has largely forgotten in favor of purely technical approaches that emphasize external results, while neglecting internal preparation necessary for authentic mastery. The root chakra, located at the base of the spine and connected to earthbending through its association with survival, grounding, and material stability, must be fully opened and purified before practitioners can access their element's deeper spiritual significance beyond mere rock and soil manipulation. The earthbenders who achieve true mastery demonstrate understanding that their element represents not just physical matter, but the principle of foundation itself, the cosmic force that provides stability and structure upon which all other manifestations can build safely and permanently. The fear and insecurity that block the root chakra create earthbending that is rigid and defensive rather than strong and supportive. Practitioners whose spiritual development remains incomplete, displaying techniques that emphasize barriers and obstacles rather than the patient strength that can endure any challenge while providing reliable support for others. The healing of these spiritual wounds requires accepting connection to the material world as sacred responsibility rather than burden, recognizing that physical existence serves spiritual purposes that transcend individual survival or comfort. The sacral chakra, positioned in the lower abdomen and associated with pleasure, creativity, and emotional flow, connects directly to water bending through its governance of feelings and adaptation that mirror water's essential nature as the element of change and life force circulation. The waterbenders who master their spiritual development through this energy center learn to work with emotional currents as skillfully as they manipulate physical water, their techniques incorporating psychological insight and empathetic understanding that transforms their abilities from mere liquid control into healing arts that address spiritual as well as physical imbalances. The guilt and emotional repression that obstruct the sacral chakra manifest in water bending that lacks fluidity and responsiveness. Practitioners whose spiritual blockages prevent them from accessing their element's full potential, often displaying techniques that seem forced or artificial rather than naturally flowing. The purification of this energy center requires embracing emotional authenticity while developing discernment that allows appropriate expression without being overwhelmed by feelings that exceed individual capacity for healthy processing. The solar plexus chakra, located above the navel and connected to personal power, will, and self-esteem, provides the spiritual foundation for firebending through its association with transformation and the inner fire that drives all conscious action toward meaningful goals. The firebenders who achieve authentic mastery understand that their element represents not destructive force, but rather the cosmic energy that enables growth, change, and the manifestation of creative potential that serves universal rather than merely personal purposes. The shame and powerlessness that block the solar plexus chakra create firebending that is either explosively uncontrolled or weakly insufficient. Practitioners whose spiritual development remains incomplete, displaying either destructive rage that harms everything around them or timid flames that cannot accomplish necessary tasks. The healing of this energy center requires developing healthy relationship with personal power that honors both individual capability and responsibility to serve others through abilities that have been granted for universal benefit rather than personal aggrandizement. The heart chakra, positioned at the center of the chest and associated with love, compassion, and connection, serves as the spiritual foundation for airbending through its governance of breath, movement, and the circulation of life energy that connects all living beings across apparent boundaries of separation. The airbenders who master their spiritual development through this energy center learn that their element represents not mere atmospheric manipulation, but the principle of unity itself, the cosmic force that maintains connection between individual consciousness and universal awareness. The grief and closed-heartedness that obstruct the heart chakra manifest in airbending that lacks the joy and freedom that characterize authentic air mastery. Practitioners whose spiritual blockages prevent them from accessing their element's essential nature, often displaying techniques that seem heavy or labored rather than light and effortless. The opening of this energy center requires embracing love as both personal experience and cosmic principle, while developing wisdom that allows appropriate boundaries without cutting off the emotional connections that make life meaningful. The throat chakra, located at the neck and connected to communication, truth, and creative expression, influences all bending arts through its governance of how consciousness translates internal understanding into external manifestation that serves communication between individual awareness and collective wisdom. The masters who achieve full development of this energy center learn to use their bending abilities as forms of artistic expression and spiritual teaching that convey understanding beyond what words alone could ever communicate. Effectively, The lies and suppressed truth that block the throat chakra create bending that serves deception or ego gratification rather than authentic communication and service to others. Practitioners whose spiritual development remains incomplete, using their abilities to impress audiences or gain personal advantage rather than sharing wisdom and beauty that elevate everyone who witnesses their demonstrations. The purification of this energy center requires commitment to honesty in all aspects of life, while developing skill at expressing truth in ways that serve healing rather than causing unnecessary harm. The third eye chakra, positioned between the eyebrows and associated with intuition, wisdom, and spiritual sight, provides access to the deeper understanding that transforms mere technique into authentic mastery that serves cosmic purposes rather than limited personal goals. The benders who develop this spiritual center learn to perceive the connections between their individual abilities and universal principles that govern all manifestation, their techniques incorporating insight that transcends conventional categories and limitations. The illusion and spiritual blindness that obstruct the third eye chakra create bending that remains trapped within conventional thinking and inherited assumptions. Practitioners whose spiritual development lacks this essential component, often displaying great technical skill, without the wisdom necessary to apply their abilities appropriately to serve authentic spiritual purposes. The opening of this energy center requires releasing attachment to limited perspectives while developing discernment that can distinguish between genuine spiritual insight and mere intellectual speculation or wishful thinking. The crown chakra, located at the top of the head and connected to cosmic consciousness and spiritual enlightenment, represents the ultimate goal of all authentic bending practice. Complete alignment between individual will and universal principles that serve the welfare of all conscious beings throughout space and time. The masters who achieve this level of spiritual development transcend the boundaries between different elements while maintaining deep appreciation for each one's unique contribution to cosmic harmony and balance. The attachment and spiritual materialism that prevent full opening of the crown chakra create bending that serves ego gratification rather than spiritual service. Practitioners whose development remains incomplete, often displaying impressive abilities, while lacking the humility and wisdom necessary to use those abilities in ways that truly serve universal welfare. The purification of this final energy center requires complete surrender of personal agenda while maintaining passionate commitment to serving others through whatever abilities have been granted for that purpose. The meditation practices that support chakra development and spiritual purification must be adapted to each individual's temperament and cultural background, while maintaining connection to universal principles that transcend particular traditions or methodologies. The techniques that work effectively often combine physical postures, breathing exercises, visualization practices, and ethical conduct that creates lifestyle supporting spiritual growth rather than hindering it through conflicting values or inappropriate activities. The emotional purification that authentic spiritual development requires involves facing and healing psychological wounds that create blockages in energy flow, while developing emotional intelligence and regulation skills that allow appropriate response to challenging situations without being overwhelmed by feelings or circumstances that exceed individual capacity for healthy management. This process often reveals how completely spiritual development and practical effectiveness are interrelated rather than separate domains. The original masters embodied these spiritual principles naturally, their consciousness aligned with cosmic forces through lifetimes of spiritual development that human practitioners must achieve through conscious effort and sustained practice over many years or decades of dedicated work. Their examples demonstrate what becomes possible when individual consciousness surrenders completely to universal principles while maintaining passionate commitment to serving others through whatever abilities such surrender makes available. The war that corrupted bending practice throughout the Four Nations represented more than political conflict, but rather fundamental misunderstanding of power's proper relationship to spiritual development. The aggressive applications that emerged from militaristic thinking, violating essential principles that determine whether elemental abilities serve constructive or destructive purposes. The techniques that emphasized domination and conquest created spiritual pollution that affected practitioners even when they achieved tactical success through methods that violated their element's essential nature. The healing of these corruptions requires returning to original understanding while adapting ancient wisdom to contemporary circumstances that present challenges the original masters never faced directly. The purification process involves both individual, spiritual development and collective cultural transformation that honors authentic traditions while serving current needs, rather than simply repeating historical forms without understanding their essential spiritual significance. The Avatar's role in preserving original wisdom encompasses not just technical knowledge, but the spiritual understanding that gives such knowledge meaning and prevents its corruption through inappropriate application or motivation. The cosmic consciousness that the Avatar can access provides direct connection to original Master's understanding, while offering guidance for applying that wisdom to circumstances that require creative adaptation rather than simple repetition of established patterns. And so, the spiritual philosophy that underlies all authentic bending practice continues to offer guidance for those who seek mastery that serves universal rather than merely personal purposes. The chakra system providing framework for development that honors both individual growth and collective welfare, while ensuring that power serves wisdom rather than corrupting consciousness through contact with forces that transcend normal human limitations. The original Master's examples demonstrating what becomes possible when spiritual development and elemental mastery unite in service of cosmic harmony that benefits all conscious beings throughout the vast expanses of space and time. In the contemporary world that emerged from the ashes of the 100-Year War and the profound transformations that followed its conclusion, the ancient knowledge of original bending masters has taken on renewed significance as practitioners seek to understand how foundational wisdom can inform modern applications while preserving essential spiritual principles that give elemental mastery its authentic power and cosmic purpose. The legacy of badger moles, dragons, sky bison, and celestial spirits continues to influence bending development through channels both obvious and subtle, their teachings providing guidance that remains as relevant today as it was during the Golden Ages, when human civilization first learned to dance with elemental forces under their patient and wise instruction. The metal-bending police force that maintains order in Republic City represents direct application of original earthbending principles to contemporary law enforcement challenges, their techniques incorporating seismic sensitivity and structural awareness that badger moles demonstrated through millions of years of underground construction and tunnel warfare. The officers who master these abilities learn to read criminal behavior through vibration analysis, while their crowd control methods employ earth manipulation that channels suspects' energy rather than simply overwhelming them through superior force. Their approach reflecting understanding that authentic power serves protection rather than domination. The healing arts that continue to evolve within waterbending communities draw increasingly upon knowledge preserved in ancient texts and oral traditions that describe how the moon and ocean spirits originally shared their wisdom with human practitioners, their techniques incorporating lunar timing and tidal awareness that enhances therapeutic effectiveness while maintaining spiritual connection to cosmic forces that govern all life. The masters who achieve greatest success in these applications often display intuitive understanding of energy flow patterns that mirrors the eternal dance between Tui and La in their sacred oasis. The industrial applications of firebending that drive modern manufacturing and transportation systems require practitioners to maintain connection to their element's life-giving essence while serving technological demands that previous generations never encountered. Their challenge involving preservation of spiritual purity while working in environments that emphasize efficiency and productivity over traditional contemplative practices. The most successful industrial firebenders often incorporate meditation techniques derived from dragon wisdom, their inner flame remaining connected to cosmic sources despite external pressures that could easily corrupt their spiritual development. The airbending revival that began with Aang's survival and continued through his children and the Air Acolytes demonstrates how original teachings can be transmitted across cultural boundaries when essential principles are preserved, while surface forms adapt to contemporary circumstances and diverse backgrounds. The new practitioners who embrace air nomad philosophy often discover that sky bison wisdom remains accessible through meditation and respectful observation, their techniques developing along lines that honor ancient masters while serving modern needs for environmental harmony and spiritual growth. The conservation efforts that protect surviving populations of original bending masters have become crucial elements in preserving knowledge that exists nowhere else in forms accessible to human consciousness. These programs recognizing that the creatures themselves serve as living libraries containing information that cannot be replicated through purely academic study or theoretical analysis. The sanctuaries established for sky bison, dragon habitats, and badger mole territories provide not just species protection, but educational opportunities that allow contemporary practitioners to learn directly from sources that predate human civilization itself. The research institutions that study original bending forms often discover that their most significant insights emerge not from laboratory analysis or controlled experiments, but from patient observation and respectful interaction with the patient observation. Masters themselves, their methodologies requiring synthesis of scientific rigor and spiritual sensitivity that honors both intellectual curiosity and reverence for wisdom that transcends academic categorization. The scholars who achieve breakthrough understanding typically display personal spiritual development that allows authentic communication across species boundaries rather than mere external observation. The White Lotus organization's role in preserving ancient knowledge has evolved beyond simple historical preservation to encompass active transmission of wisdom that remains vital for contemporary spiritual development and elemental mastery, their members serving as bridges between traditional understanding and modern applications, while ensuring that essential principles survive cultural changes that might otherwise obscure or corrupt authentic teachings. The masters within this secret society often maintain direct connection to original sources through meditation practices and pilgrimage journeys that most practitioners never undertake. The educational systems that train new generations of benders increasingly incorporate study of original masters, alongside technical instruction and combat applications, recognizing that authentic mastery requires understanding historical and spiritual foundations rather than mere proficiency in elemental manipulation techniques. The curricula that prove most effective typically balance theoretical knowledge with practical experience that includes direct interaction with preserved specimens or protected populations of original bending creatures whenever such contact can be arranged safely and respectfully. The technological developments that characterize modern civilization create both opportunities and challenges for maintaining connection to original bending wisdom, advanced communication and transportation systems, enabling global knowledge sharing, while industrial demands and urban environments, potentially isolating practitioners from natural settings where original masters traditionally taught their human students. The balance between embracing beneficial innovations and preserving essential spiritual practices requires careful discernment that honors both progress and tradition. The environmental restoration projects that employ bending abilities for ecological healing and species recovery often rediscover techniques that original masters developed for maintaining natural balance. Their applications incorporating understanding of ecosystems and energy flow patterns that purely technological approaches cannot achieve. The practitioners who specialize in these applications typically develop spiritual sensitivity that approaches shamanic awareness, while their technical skills serve purposes that transcend narrow human interests to encompass welfare of all and living systems. The international cooperation that has emerged in the post-war world creates unprecedented opportunities for sharing knowledge between different bending traditions while preserving regional variations that reflect diverse cultural approaches to working with original masters' teachings. The exchange programs that facilitate this learning often produce innovations that honor multiple traditions simultaneously, while creating synthesis that serves contemporary needs without violating essential spiritual principles that govern authentic elemental mastery. The artistic applications of bending that flourish in peaceful societies often return to original masters' examples for inspiration, their creators recognizing that the most profound aesthetic achievements emerge from spiritual connection rather than mere technical virtuosity or innovative technique. The performances and sculptures that achieve lasting impact typically incorporate understanding of elemental philosophy that transforms entertainment into spiritual teaching, while their beauty serves educational purposes that words alone could never accomplish effectively. The therapeutic applications of bending that address both physical and psychological trauma increasingly draw upon original masters' examples of healing that encompasses entire being rather than merely symptomatic relief. Their techniques recognizing that authentic restoration requires addressing spiritual as well as material causes of suffering. The healers who achieve greatest success often display understanding of energy, flow, and consciousness that mirrors original masters' natural wisdom, while their compassion reflects spiritual development that honors traditional values. Within contemporary contexts, the martial applications of bending that serve legitimate defense needs without violating spiritual principles require practitioners to maintain connection to original masters' understanding of when force serves protection and when it becomes corruption. Their training incorporating ethical development alongside technical skills, while their philosophy emphasizes minimum necessary intervention rather than overwhelming superiority. The warriors who embody these ideals often serve as examples of how power can remain spiritually pure while effectively deterring aggression and protecting innocent beings. The architectural applications of bending that create structures serving modern needs while honoring natural principles often incorporate design elements inspired by original masters' examples of working with rather than against environmental forces. Their buildings demonstrating how human creativity can enhance natural beauty, while their functionality serves community welfare rather than individual aggrandizement. The architects who achieve greater success typically spend significant time studying how badger moles create tunnel systems and how air temples integrate with mountain landscapes. The agricultural applications of bending that support sustainable food production increasingly return to techniques that original masters demonstrated for enhancing soil fertility and plant growth without depleting natural systems or creating dependency on external inputs. Their methods incorporating understanding of seasonal cycles and ecological relationships that industrial agriculture often ignores in favor of short-term productivity increases. The farmers who master these approaches often discover that their yields improve while their spiritual connection to land and growing things deepens through practices that honor natural wisdom. The transportation systems that employ bending abilities for moving people and goods across long distances often incorporate principles that Sky Bison demonstrated for efficient aerial travel and energy conservation, their designs emphasizing harmony with atmospheric forces rather than simple conquest of distance through brute power application. The engineers who develop these systems typically study traditional air nomad approaches to flight while adapting ancient wisdom to serve contemporary mobility needs without violating environmental harmony or spiritual principles. And so the great work of integrating original wisdom with contemporary needs continues across all areas of human activity where bending abilities can serve beneficial purposes, the ancient masters' teachings proving as relevant today as they were during civilization's infancy, their examples demonstrating how power can serve wisdom rather than corrupting consciousness through inappropriate application, their legacy, ensuring that future generations will have access to authentic understanding that transcends temporary cultural changes while serving eternal principles that honor both individual development and collective welfare throughout. The continuing dance of consciousness and element across the vast expanse of space and time that connects all beings in the eternal web of existence. And so we reach the end of our journey through the sacred origins of bending, having witnessed how the eternal dance between consciousness and element first began in ages beyond memory, when badger moles carved wisdom into stone, when dragons breathed life into flame, when sky bison taught mortals to soar on wings of wind, and when celestial spirits shared their cosmic secrets with humble human hearts. These original masters continue their patient work in the deep places and high places of the world, their teachings echoing through every movement of earth and water, fire and air that serves harmony rather than conquest, healing rather than harm. Their legacy lives not in monuments of stone or volumes of written knowledge, but in the living practice of those who remember that true power flows from partnership with natural forces rather than domination over them, who understand that mastery means becoming worthy vessels for cosmic energies that connect all consciousness across the boundaries of species and time. As you drift toward peaceful rest, carry with you this ancient wisdom, that every element holds secrets waiting to be discovered by those who approach with humility and wonder, that the greatest bending techniques emerge from love rather than fear, and that somewhere in the eternal dance of moon and tide, earth and root, flame and breath, the original masters continue their teaching for all who seek to learn with open hearts and patient spirits.